special meeting, and we'll start by standing and having a moment of silence. Next, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda.
I'll move to adopt the agenda as written.
All right. Motion by Dr. Kudak,
Second.
second by Mr. Peridot. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Let me note that Ms. Ritchie, she'll be here later on. She had a conflict at this first part of the meeting. She will be here later on. Next item is public comments. Are there any public comments? All right, we have 3 people here with public comments, and just as a reminder, since this is a special meeting, the public comments can only pertain to items that are on the agenda at this meeting. But we certainly want to hear the thoughts, and so the first person is up is Mr. Ken Howard. Mr. Howard?
Good evening, everybody. I'm a little sleep deprived, so I'll apologize now. I just want to make sure that we look at all of our needs involved in the athletic complex and moving forward. I know that we've discovered that our contingency is a little fatter than we originally thought. I don't know what your plans are in completing everything now. That includes the entire complex and maybe even looking at some preschool adjustments. But I would implore you, if you have the money available, even if you don't complete the entire complex, please build the field house now. That would be a place where all the teams could use it year-round, whether they have a field there or not. If you build a complete field house with indoor practice facilities, batting cages, equipment storage, whatever, even if the fields don't get completed now, those teams and those kids can use that new facility in that field house until that's done. We love having a GRC in our building. But it's a logistical nightmare, not only with games, but practices especially. I feel like if we move forward with the field house and hopefully even the other fields, at least practice-wise, GRC's got their own place. We have our place because our current athletic facilities are getting trampled with double use. So I would just ask, in moving forward in the budget, if you see fit that the field house is something that's attainable now, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have, I'd like to make sure I'm reading this writing correctly, is Dominica Parton. How badly do I do?
Monica.
I'm not perfect, just ask anyway. So if you would please come up.
That says /track parents who are supposed to come be my help. Gotcha. So I don't have to be alone. So we represent the middle school and high school boosters. We're also some of us middle school parents as well. We just wanted to come and also talk about the athletic facilities, particularly for track. Track requires that some pieces be built in to the track as you begin to construct. And if you don't put those in, then you're putting us in a place where we can't still host track meets. You know, our kids just got back from indoor track state, and the girls at high school I'm talking about came in 3rd with no facilities to practice. They run inside the high school hallways, and they came in 3rd in the state. So imagine what we could do if we had facilities. The boys came in 6th, so that's also worth noting. Right now in track, we've got nearly 100 students who've come out to run. So we're talking about a program as big as football here. So we think that those students deserve facilities. We're going to need, here's a list for you, pole vault, an area for that, as well as its runway, a jumps sand pit for long jump and triple jump, shot put pad, and then the sector where you throw, blocks to run out of, a discus throw cage in the area where that discus is going to land when it's thrown, full set of hurdles, a javelin throw area and its runway, and we have kids who are in every one of these events. We're getting ready to have our home track meet at Transylvania University this Saturday, and they graciously loan out their place to us. We do give them some of the profit in some way. I don't know what kind of deal it is, but we go all the way over there so that we can host a track meet. Dodd just told us a few minutes ago we've been in training for our judging this weekend because we get to work the track meet. He just told us there's nearly 40 teams coming, 2 from out of state. So we have the ability to do such a track meet even without facilities. So if we had such facilities, we could be doing this here instead of having to go back and forth all weekend to Transylvania to host a track meet. So with all this equipment, we too would like to have a field house where we could store it. Currently we have some outbuilding somewhere that we put all the stuff. And I personally, when my kid needs to run hurdles, I have to go pick them up wherever they are in my own personal car so that she can practice.
This time it took 2 cars.
Yeah, this time it took 2 cars and 2 of us to get all the hurdles. What else?
I second all of that, and I know I have a hurdler. Yes.
If you could just, for the record, if you could let us know your name?
Oh, sorry. My name is Carrie Taylor,
How do you spell that?
Carrie. And I'm also a parent of 2 indoor, outdoor, and cross-country runners,
Okay.
and a track booster officer. Monica has pointed out all these things. I have a hurdler who is excited to go to Transy this Friday to practice on the thing because she can jump more than 1 hurdle at a time. Because at our practice, a lot of times they just have the 1 hurdle because we don't have a way to keep them at our track. It's kind of non-existent. So she's like, I'm really excited because I get to jump more than 1 hurdle. That's not good. But I guess my thing is she kind of covered the facilities part. I see our runners and I see the comments they make, and I guess my thing is mirroring her comments from a different angle. I feel like, I know there's options that y'all are discussing. I feel like we're at a disadvantage because we know that different things are being discussed as to what to do with monies, but we aren't aware of what those options are. So I guess I'm saying any opportunity that you have to put these athletics facilities, I want to say on a fast track, but on a completion track, to do the absolute best facilities that we can do for these runners, for the football players, for the basketball players, for any of them. But us particularly, we're with the runners. I hear our kids say all the time, I'll never see them. I'll never run on them. That's what they think. That's the image they have in their head of kind of the whole process. They're discouraged because they don't think they'll ever see this completed track where they can actually run on it and make use of it. I'd love to prove that mentality wrong. I want them to be able to look forward to this, to know they're going to get to participate on it. We have a very young program. We have a very young program with very talented runners in our indoor, outdoor, and cross country. We have a program that is very well known throughout the state, that competes very well throughout the state. And like DeMonica said, we do that with no facilities.
Okay. I don't want to cut you off, but the item you all are speaking about is the discussion of value engineering
Yeah.
item. And unless I misinterpret what the term value engineering means, what we're going to be looking for is opportunities to optimize what's currently already been approved.
On that note, just a quick question. For what's already been approved, is there an outlet, an opportunity for the programs, the coaches, the boosters, the people who work directly with those programs, to have a say or to have input for that as far as how they're completed and how it would best work to promote the program?
During the programming with all the track coaches were involved, met with the architects to track the areas you're talking about, all those things they met with and went over all that with them. So I know the track, the actual 8-lane running track is part of the field that's being constructed. The other areas, maybe as we get, I'll be glad to talk with you maybe tomorrow if you want to give me a call too. When I was in the plan, I can show you some of the drawings, that's what's there. But I'd like your best.
Oh, sure.
A copy of
You
it.
have
If
it.
you want to keep a copy, we'll make a
I don't
copy.
think I need it, you can have it. Thank you.
Well, we very much appreciate your input.
Okay, thank you.
The next person is David Boland, talking about item number 4, capital spending projects. Proposals, rather.
I'm going to be the broken record, I guess, again. I've been up here, and most of you know the one thing I constantly talk about is technology. When we're looking at capital spending, I think we're 5 or 6 years in, and I realize GRC is probably in better shape than most schools in this district. But if we don't begin to start replacing technology, you're going to find yourselves in 3 or 4 years down the road, somebody's going to be standing before you, and it won't be me. I'll be hopefully sitting at the beach somewhere, but trying to figure out where you're going to get $250,000, $300,000 to start replacing all the machines at one time. I think that's been a downfall in Clark County all the years, even before I got here, that things weren't upkept. And I think we need to be proactive. You guys are in a very unique position. Most districts across the state of Kentucky love to be sitting where Clark County is right now. I think that's good and bad. I think it's a testament to the fact that you've been wise and prudent in spending money, making decisions, but at the same time, there's needs that need to be addressed. And also, I realize there's a lot of capital requests coming before you tonight as far as maintenance items that need to be addressed, but I do encourage you to take a long, hard look. We need a solid plan of replacing technology, because technology is quickly getting outdated every day. You guys know that. I don't have to talk about it. Second thing I want to mention, I know there's some things coming before you tonight on that athletic and extracurricular list that's in those capital requests. I don't think most people realize, but those athletic departments operate solely off ticket sales. What money we generate at the gate, that's the only thing we use. If it wasn't for boosters, track boosters, you guys do an excellent job taking care of your programs. But we operate off of very little gate revenue. And it's hard to keep up with things, and I thank God for boosters. I thank God for what the board does. I mean, I didn't realize you guys do a lot, and I appreciate that. But also, I know there's some lists coming for you tonight for some equipment. It's not consumables, it's just to replace stuff that's getting outdated. And eventually, in time, that catches up with you, and I think that's about where we're to get to right now. Another item I know you heard mentioned tonight, I really encourage you to take a long, hard look at the field house. I think the field house is a critical component that needs to be addressed. When we talk about football, you talk about 6A football, nobody wants to play when you're a 6A school in football. Most schools are afraid, they don't want to mess with the large schools. But you have to be physically strong in 6A football if you want to play, contend for state titles. All right, we've got a great new field coming online. I know that, a great new gym, but we need a field house because we've got to have somewhere to lift weights, or either we're going to be trying to put together a weight room in the new gym somehow, or we're going to be going to the old football field to lift weights. So that's, I think, something that really needs to be looked at is the field house. It's a critical component for all sports, not just football, but it's a great indoor area, training area for all sports. Anybody could take advantage of that. Another thing I'll mention, and I know it's taboo, but reoccurring cost, but just based on what's happening in society right now, what's happening in this community and in the schools, we've got some major issues in Clark County with mental health. And it is magnifying itself at the high school. I really encourage you to take a long, hard look. Again, I know it's reoccurring expenses, but we need some behaviorists, some interventionists, people who can work, who are specialized in dealing with mental health and behavior issues, because it's becoming rampant.
That's probably outside of our agenda.
And I'm finished with that.
Okay.
You know, work session, I thought we were gonna be able to talk about stuff. I mean, this is all expenditures. We're taking on a special call meeting all of a sudden.
Well,
We're having to stick to an agenda.
I'll defer to I'll defer on that to the person here who went to law school, which is our attorney. But it was my understanding that a work session is a special call meeting, and we have to stick to just the items that are on the agenda, which can be fairly, I mean, you know, we've got some breadth on that. Capital spending proposals can involve a lot of things, but it probably would not be a recurring, to talk about recurring expenses. Am I speaking out of turn on that, Mr.
I
Elton?
think you're correct. I think you're correct.
Just different than any work sessions I've ever had. That's okay.
Well, all of our school board training sessions say there are only two kinds of meetings: regular monthly meetings and special meetings. Work sessions come under the category of special meetings according to all the training that we've had. And the way you get everything in a work session is you list everything you want to talk about or may even think about talking about on the agenda.
Now, that doesn't mean that perhaps we shouldn't, you know, think about scheduling some additional meetings in the future, but I want to make sure that, you know, that we're following all the rules, so somebody doesn't then come back later on and say, why did you do it a certain way? So that concludes the public comment section. Next, we get to item number 2, which is discussion of value engineering and revenue generation items for the GRC Performance Gymnasium and Athletic Complex. And what I wanted to start out with before we get into that, and I'd love to get the input of our advisors on this, is to make sure when we're talking about value engineering that we have a general agreement of what value engineering is. I found a couple definitions. That value engineering can be defined as an organized effort directed at analyzing design building features, systems, equipment, and material selections for the purpose of achieving essential functions at the lowest life cycle cost consistent with the requirement of performance, quality, reliability, and safety. And then I saw some notes that the Department of Highways describes value engineering as a method of looking at potential ways to improve the project or to reduce unnecessary costs with still meeting the desired design objectives. So I could be off base on this, but I think as an overall statement, feel free to chime in here. Well, value engineering is not talking about changing the scope of the project, but is essentially talking about how we can optimize the scope that we already have planned out there. Is that a reasonable overall description of it? Because I know some people might look at this and go, oh, you know, they're going to be, you know, talking about anything and everything having to do with the athletic and gym project. And I don't think that's our charge tonight, and I don't think that we will be. Is that a reasonable caveat to put over the top of our discussion, fellow board members? All right. Well, that being said, then we'll turn it over and start this process. Included in our packet, and for those of you all who may not be aware, for all of our board meetings, the information that's given to the board members is posted on the website, and you can download this information and see exactly what we have. And there's two items that are in that packet. The first one is, we'll call it the potential VE or value engineering list. And then there's a second one that has some comments on this, and there's some overlap within the two of these. And I think probably the easiest way to go through this is if we could maybe we can just get the folks from Ross Tarrant and Codell just to come on up and sit at the table, and let's just start talking through some of these things. Because again, it is a work session. We have a little bit more informality in terms of trying to get through items here. Is that okay with you guys?
That's fine.
So this is not an interrogation, we just thought we'd give you a table to work on here so we can just start working through some of these things.
For the sake of time, would it be possible for just the architects and Mr. Codell to tell us what they recommend, and then if the board, because we've had these lists, and we can ask questions about other things and why they don't recommend, and let's try to make it through here instead of going through this entire list. I think I'm more interested in what they think is going to be beneficial to us rather than going through an entire list.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable idea, and I think we also need to, then, when we've gone through that, then leave time if board members want to talk about anything that's on this list they proposed, or really anything else, any other value engineering ideas, we can bring those up at the end. Does that seem like a reasonable approach, guys? Okay, so
Okay.
that should focus our time a little bit more. And probably then the second one that's up there, since that includes your all's comments.
Oh, let me begin by saying this, that in general principle, I agree with the definition of value engineering from the standpoint of, in its strictest form, it's trying to maintain the scope of the work or the program that was there and trying to do it at a reduced cost. I mean, that's where the value part of the whole engineering comes in. At the same time, I'll tell you that it's been my experience that from a budget perspective or from a dollars and cents perspective, a lot of times value engineering starts to include items that maybe alter the scope of work in terms of having to do that when you do not have monies to move forward. Now, the good part about what's happened with this project as a whole for the competition and athletics, upgrades, had to do with we were able to take the base bid, take select alternates, and have Codell and the contractors moving forward right now in terms of construction. At the same time, there was this thought about, are there ways or opportunities to save money? So in that line of thinking or rationale, I will tell you that the two things that we've recommended on this list were items that we felt met that very strict definition in terms of, like, number one, it's actually item number 3, it's up there. It's the metal panels. And what we're talking about here is that we actually had a base bid that provided competition as required by the Department of Education. We had a preferred metal panel manufacturer that matched the metal panels that are on the high school now at the auditorium, and there's a little bit around on the ATC. So with the gym being sitting right there and being very prominent, we looked at, like, what's that cost? When we received bids, we had one contractor to include it in his base bid. We had a couple others that included what it was going to cost to add that. The low bid from ABR as your roofer and doing the metal panels, he had an add of $98,900, I believe. So out of that money, I contacted him and talked to him about why so high, what's going on. And that's why you're seeing a line item here that he said, look, if I was not certified to install those panels and provide the warranty at bid date, and so we contracted with an improved installer from the manufacturer, and I can get certified and make that installation and save in the neighborhood of $50,000. Great. So knowing that, it was a lot easier to come and recommend that we go ahead and take that preferred alternate for the metal panels, knowing we could save about half of what that cost was and maintain the look and the panels that match the high school, okay, what's already there. And so that's a good example of saving $50,000 and not changing the scope of work at all, or the final product. We're not even changing the product. We're changing just the installer. And I have I have complete confidence with ABR.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of them having the personnel and going through the training with dry design to be able to install those panels. So,
And on the 50,000, of course, is that a hard number or is that an approximate number?
I appreciate that. That's a good question. It started out as an approximate number because of us asking contractors to provide us some general idea of where that is. Now, I think that they may have come back and actually said
They have agreed to that.
that's a hard number.
50,000 even.
Right. So if the
Okay.
board is interested in allowing that, this is a very easy one for you all to nod and say, yeah, I think let's go ahead and pursue that. And we'll go about actually creating a formal change order for board approval.
Right? So, again, trying to abbreviate a time, what do you all think about this this first idea on number 3, that they've, to allow the metal wall painter installer to get certified so they can do the installation themselves.
Is there anything to think about?
I'm sorry?
Is there anything to think about? I mean,
I mean,
there it is. I mean,
Okay.
okay. I mean,
It seemed like a good
we're
idea
not,
to me.
we're not, you know, making the decision, but I mean,
Right.
it's been explained and sounds good. I mean,
well, then we'll go ahead and get the paperwork generated, stuff like
Okay.
that, and bring that to you for a formal approval.
So,
Okay?
being no objections, you all are then going to take this and you're going to
Pull that together.
put it in a position that you can then bring it back and give us a formal proposal that we can approve at a session where we can make decisions.
Okay?
Okay?
Item number 4 is the other one that I will tell you that we've made a recommendation that you really seriously consider, and because it actually does not eliminate any showers, it just changes the finishes within the showers. And we have, I want to say, is it 27? Is that the number? No. I think we have between the gym, the locker rooms in the gym, and the locker rooms out at the football stadium, underneath those, you know, the bleachers. I think we have 27 different individual shower stalls. And we had a representative come in that was talking about a kind of a solid surface, a monolithic stall that would be placed. So you have no grout, no seams, you know, very, you know, clean, very easy to maintain.
This is the BioPrism product.
Yes. And that way, you know, with that number, we were told that it was going to be a very, you know, low-cost change to go from that versus the normal ceramic tile that we place over the block, over the CMU concrete masonry unit that we would have. So, but when the bids came in terms of VE items, we noticed that that was one of the ones that was much higher than what we anticipated. And so here again, we're talking about a change in the finish, going back to more of a standard product that we have installed in most other locations as far as gyms and stuff and locker rooms go. And that is a very preliminary number that we're talking about because we are going to make a savings on actually taking the shower surrounds out of the project, but then we have to get a number for putting new tile in. And at this point, I can tell you, we've not gotten any details about exactly what tile, 4x4, 6x6, you know, 8x8. We haven't gotten into the height of the tile, whether we want to take the tile up to 8 foot and stop, and then continue on with just the painted CMU above that. I think that's not a problem in the sense that, unfortunately, in many instances, some of these showers become storage for uniforms or equipment, and there's not as many people actually utilizing the showers. Now, I hope that they would. We want to make sure we have showers available, and I have no problem with what we go back to in terms of the ceramic tile, providing a waterproof, you know, finish and changing that and still maintaining, again, all the showers and all of the venues and not changing the program.
Mr. Christie, have you all had a chance,
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, to give some thought to the maintenance part of this equation as to the pros and cons? I mean, it'll have a different look if it's ceramic tile versus the solid surface.
We have ceramic tile all throughout the district right now, so we have ceramic tile.
Okay.
How does this Indurant BioPrism material, what's the durability? Do you have any information on the durability of it compared to traditional whatevers?
It's very durable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very durable solid surface material that would last as long, if not longer than a tile.
Okay.
It's like a corian or something. It's like a man-made product that's blended and molded and formed. Very durable, very, you know, very water-resistant kind of a thing. And having no grout lines, I guess it is. That's why we have it in the project to begin with. But we were surprised that we didn't get the cost savings that we had been sort of, you know, kind of informed from a sales perspective that the volume discount didn't seem to happen.
If there is an incident, let's say a section of it's damaged, shouldn't be damaged, but maybe someone gets mad or something like that and breaks it. What is the relative, how do you fix the, what is the tiles called, the geoprism tile versus a ceramic tile?
Well, the ceramic tile makes it easy. You damage a certain section, you pop that off, you fix the CMU if they've actually broken that, and then regrout it and you're done. With this, material, I don't know exactly the process of having to cut out and then try to somehow form or have to take the whole unit out if it's damaged enough, where you gotta pull the whole thing out and start over again. So if you're concerned about that being an issue from it being almost like vandalized, then you're probably better off with the ceramic tile.
Infections are an issue in locker rooms. Does this surface confer any advantages from that respect?
I would think it would, without having any grout and stuff like that. You're talking about a monolithic product, no grout, just it being seamless, being easier to maintain with whatever kind of chemical cleaning solutions that you want to use, any kind of antimicrobial, antibacterial sprays, that type of thing. Again, like Mr. Christie said, not only do you have that in Clark County everywhere in terms of your existing locker rooms, but we have that in most every other venue in terms of where we go. We looked at this as being an upgrade, being something a little bit better, hoping it would still be, from a value standpoint, worthwhile. The fact that we can get into the neighborhood of $150,000 in saving is why we're having this conversation. We think that that was something that we were comfortable recommending because of what you would be going to in terms of history. But it's certainly viewed as a stronger product. It's just a question of whether the value is there and how. I would be interested to know exactly how we anticipate the locker rooms being used, because there's been way too many times we walk in and they keep one shower and like the other two showers of the three are like turned into hanging storage or some kind.
Does this include deleting the custom slot drains and replacing with more typical floor drains?
Yes, that's correct. In fact, that's one of the driving issues right now, where during construction is about to catch up with us to where the plumber needs to know what we're doing so we get the right drain, and prepped and everything and installed.
And that's the reason why in our second meeting tonight, that's an agenda item, is if this is something we're interested in, they'll.
No, I can share, okay. I appreciate I do appreciate your willingness to try to move this forward, but at the same time, we do not have a hard number at all.
Well, do they need, the reason I put it on there, and you don't have a hard number, but do you all need a decision this evening or within X time frame so the timeline doesn't get disturbed? Because that's what my concern was. I'll just throw out a what if. Did y'all could say, you think it's 52,000, but you're about 99% certain it's going to be at least 25 or some other really low number.
If there's an opportunity to request that there's a range here and that we don't have a hard number, that yes, if you want to keep it just as it is, then you can tell the contractor tomorrow, everybody just keeps going. If you also tell us, no, let's make the change, you can tell the contractor tomorrow, and that's an easy part of the change just for what's going to happen below slab. Then the rest of it, we've got plenty of time for us to go ahead and get them the details of what we want the tile to look like, to actually pick a tile,
We would like to get some direction as far as on the plumbing side of things.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't know what the pleasure of the rest of the board will be, but because this potentially would be a fork in the road, that's why it's on the second meeting.
What is your timeline on that?
We're planning on pouring a section of the slab on grade this week, assuming we could get some sort of direction on this item. If worse comes to worse, we can hold off on that last piece and block out for it. But one of the locker rooms is in the slab prep for this week.
When you say hold off, what's your timeline?
Well, if we were to bring it back to you formally at the next board meeting, we'd have to sit until then, a couple more weeks.
All right.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's not the kind of place that you want to do a block out, or like say, have like
Right, yeah.
a break in the slab versus having the drain known. And as long as with the board's indulgence that, you know, we're talking about a credit here, and even if the credit were to be 40,000 instead of 50,000, then that's, if that's still in the range of what you consider to be worthy of moving forward, then we can make a decision. Most of the work will not be done, obviously, until we get slabs poured and walls started. We're still a year away from putting a tile on the wall.
Okay, I'm back to this, the slot drain, floor drain thing. What was the reason for recommending the slot drains to start with?
Slot drain matched up with the product, the way that the product was fabricated and had more of a slot drain instead of a round
Okay.
drain. And when we do the ceramic tile, and we end up with more of a, it's okay to use a typical round floor drain with a round or a square head, and then have that be where all the water, all the concrete, all the thin set tile goes to. And the slot drain is, again, paired with the actual product, and the floor of that is like a 3/4 of an inch thick.
Yes.
So it changes the
Yeah.
height of the drain.
Yeah. I'm kind of a fan of the slot drains, but maybe
Okay.
not at this cost.
Well, okay, well, I understand,
Yeah.
and we're kind of in that same
Yeah.
position, and I would
Yeah.
tell you that
Agreed.
if we thought it was like, okay, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 difference, I'd probably be like, okay, it's not worth considering.
Mm-hmm.
But from a value engineering standpoint, maintaining the showers, having everything work the way they've worked for the last, 100 years, in terms of school construction, why not just stay with it?
Mr. Christie, how much do you anticipate showers will be used, if you even know from your perspective? I mean, I see the kids take showers after games?
That's,
Well, but you never know when that pendulum's gonna swing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, the one time when I was in school, everybody took showers, and then all of a sudden, nobody does, and then, there's just, you just don't know how that's gonna swing, so it has to be available.
yep.
Yeah, we're not trying to eliminate the shower, we're just trying to decide how much
Right,
money we
well,
want to
that's what I'm
spend
saying,
to
though,
provide.
but, I mean, and you're probably right, you probably go to most gyms right now, and there probably is a hanging rod in every one of them, and storage, and,
But then again, we're designing some storage into these buildings too,
Right.
so hopefully
Well,
eliminate some
I
of
know,
that
but
need to do that.
that's everything you ever
Never
build,
have enough
though.
storage.
That's what I'm saying, everything you do, you don't storage. People are making millions of dollars off that right now,
Yeah.
because we don't have enough.
It doesn't make sense to look at option C, which would be to do some of the showers in a geoprism and some the other way. That would,
No.
okay, I
No.
want to make sure we've written down the paths.
That's fine, yeah. Yeah. I'd rather it be consistent one way or the other, just from a long-term, maintenance and/or just, not having the custodians cussing and have to clean the ceramic tile versus the other.
We talked about, since 52,000 is an estimate, what number do you feel pretty darn comfortable with that the savings would be at least?
Well, I mean, again, I'd go back to the 40, 45. I mean, the ceramic tile's the one number that we actually just talked with Martina.
Right.
And they gave us a ballpark based on the number of showers and just kind of that's without us having provided any additional information. Because if you came back and said, no, we really are excited about having these solid surface, let's just stay with that, not worth it. Then it's like, why would I have somebody spend a lot of their time trying to price something? Or even for us, we've got to go back now and detail this and come up with an exact proposal request to get pricing on. Because this is a contractual change to the contract. And so we want to get that all tightened up. It's a little more convoluted than, say, what we just did with the installer. It was just the one ABR and them knowing, what they could save based on the price that they were given from the other contractor. Now they're going to self-perform. So we didn't change anything in terms of the actual product. It's just a matter of labor.
Well, what do y'all think? The low end on this is estimated to be $40,000.
I'm okay with that.
It is what it is,
Well-
$40,000, so.
Well, but we give up, I think the solid surface material certainly that's a higher end look for it. I mean, that's what's in Wildcat Coal Lodge, and so we're giving that up.
Right.
But we're getting $40,000, so you
I
all like
think
that
it'll still be
trade-off?
close to the 50, but I want to be careful because.
Well, and I don't want to overpromise.
Right.
Yeah.
What do y'all think about that trade-off then?
I'm fine with it.
I'm good, let's move.
Okay. Then I'm good with it.
Okay.
So
All right.
I think in terms of form, to give you all a little bit more concreteness on this, I think in the second meeting, then we can officially say that, given the $40,000 savings that's estimated, that we feel that, that this, we could take a vote on at that point in time and give you some concrete direction on it. Because what we don't want to do is say, yeah, that sounds good to me, have them start pouring to that, and then something come up that it wasn't concretely done, knowing then that you all are still going to be coming back with a firm change order after it's been designed, so we know what the absolute number is.
That's fine. I mean, whatever your comfort level is in terms of whatever action you want to take. I mean, a lot of times we're okay with, just the general consensus of the board here, being the way that that's handled, or if in the actual special call meeting you have an opportunity with that change order line item, just, like I say, be aware we're still looking for, the whole idea of this whole VE item was to determine what the board's pleasure was. I've just gone over the two things, and the only two things that we are making a strong recommendation on. So after that, we can go back up to the top of the list if you want to.
Let's, while you're there, so these are two things that you made recommendations on. If
Right.
you had to just give us a short synopsis of why you did not make any recommendations on the others, what would it be?
Okay. Item number one, talking about the bleachers on the upper level. Well, while we're putting in bleachers, let's go ahead and put in the bleachers. We're talking about 118 seats. I wouldn't want you to come back and want to do that at a later date, and that actually changes the scope of work in terms
Right,
of the
well,
number of bleachers.
okay, you probably misunderstood what I was saying, or I didn't say it clearly. I don't want you to go through every item, I just want you to kind of tell me why. So in other words, in this one right here, you're talking about changing the scope of the project or
Right,
whatever.
most
So
everything
most
else-
everything we
right.
have changes scope of
The other
project,
items
something.
either are changing the actual physical scope in terms of what programs are being provided or seats are being provided, or the quality of the material that's being provided is being
Right.
modified.
That's kind of the way I looked at it to understand. That's why I wouldn't be for any of those changes as well, and that's why I would just rather, just board members, if they have a pet one in there they wanted to go over, let's go over it. Otherwise, I'm good with sticking with contractors and architects' recommendations.
The only other thing that's not on here, which I had some questions about, and I think they've been addressed from a technical standpoint, is the way the facility is designed right now, it's all bleachers, flat bleachers.
Mhm.
And some facilities have a certain area that have seats in them, and would it make any sense, even though we might give up some seats, to give up some capacity to put seats in? And if I understand, after researching this a little bit more, that the bottom line is, perhaps they could have been done on a cost-effective basis if somebody wanted to go down that path a long time ago, but because seats take up more space and means you lose rows, and each row has an associated rise to it, that would make a significant design change right now to switch to seats, even in the center, because of the way that the thing rises up to meet the second level. And because of that, it would be a monstrous change at this point in time. And I don't want to.
No, that's correct.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to make sure that we had thought about something like that, because I don't want us sitting in the gym years from now and saying, well, why didn't they do this? And the reason why is because it just simply didn't
What
make
number is
sense.
that?
That's not on there.
That's not.
I thought we
on there.
just got through saying we couldn't discuss it if it wasn't on there.
No, we can discuss anything that would be a value engineering item.
Well, I'm a little bit confused then.
Well, one of the reasons that, from my perspective, it's not on there is that when you start talking about chair backs and the cost of chair backs, it actually increases the cost versus value engineering, trying to save money. So we didn't even address that particularly, other than when we started talking about bleachers and the number of seats and how we had currently designed things, Mr. Heisel's right, that we actually have the ability to go from the playing floor, or I should say from the mezzanine. When students are going to come into this gym, a lot of times for an assembly, they'll come from the main building on the main floor and come onto the mezzanine, and then load the bleachers from the mezzanine down.
Well, without going any further, I think you said enough right there, and in that making that change would not be a cost savings, and wouldn't, and so that's why it's not on the list. So I don't think we need to go down that path anymore, because we established it's not on there. Does anyone else have any value engineering items or ideas that might be a cost savings item that we should
Well, I have a
consider?
question about the Hall of Fame display from upper level that was not requested by the owner. This is item 7 on the original list.
Okay, right.
What is that?
As part of our interior finishes and everything that we prepared, we had what we considered, what we're calling out, this idea of this Hall of Fame display up there on the upper level around the monumental stair and everything. And so, again, another extra bit of finish and having space to display, memorabilia.
Okay, so how is that different? I guess I'm asking, what's the surface of it compared to the other surfaces around it?
That, I believe, the Hall of Fame display was for a logo that was going to be placed in the building, and that was never in the design.
Okay.
So basically, it was kind of a moot point on the list.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
All right, thank you.
Because it was never really requested, and it never made it into the design. It was in there at one point and then taken out.
Okay, thank you.
But it could be added if you guys wanted to.
Any other ideas on how we could tweak the project to keep the same scope?
I'm sure these guys, as they go through the project, will be seeing things all the way through. I think that's pretty much normal procedure.
Right. I mean, if there's things that the contractors notice, there are things that we notice, things with Codell and their staff, same way. If there's things that they come across that we realize that we've indicated. I know a good example was when you were talking about it, like up on a mezzanine or up in a private area, like you didn't paint up on the up on the rafters kind of thing. It's like, well, normally you try to paint the block, we paint all unfinished surfaces. You decide you don't really want to paint that. Ask the painter, hey, what kind of credit can we get back for not doing something like that? If it's unnecessary or not seemed, to be absolutely, required. And we'll continue to watch for things like that and monitor that and come back to you for, any kind of action.
We'll be sending more on some stone base on the light duty paving sections.
Okay.
So it seems like then those two items are the only ones that really caught our attention in terms of being a real value savings, the value cost benefit. And then you all are left with the charge of, if you see other opportunities, not to change the scope, but to say we can do the same thing and not affect the quality, et cetera, please continue to look for opportunities to save our district some money.
Will do. Good direction.
Do you all want to talk about any more items on value engineering? Well, thank you all. The other half of the item as listed, get right back to that, is revenue generation. We don't have to talk about this right now unless it's something that there is an immediate need that needs a decision. Well, what I'm talking about there is there's been some districts that have talked about how they might market advertising space in terms of scoreboards, or even on the far end, naming rights for facilities. And I thought we probably at least ought to crack that idea open to see if anyone has any interest in trying to solicit for something like that and what the correct procedure would be. And that's why I wanted to at least get the discussion
So you have
started.
two offers kind of on the table, without getting into who they are. One would be to provide scoreboards for the gymnasium and at the football field. That includes the video boards, live feed video boards, or I think live feed, yeah, digital video boards. We have a local person who has offered to fully fund those, and I need to get Mr. Elkins to draw it up, to write, to bring to you formally, but all they're asking is that on the digital boards, it defaults back when there's not an ad or something going on, that it defaults back to their logo. If they do any advertising, they have to pay for the advertising just like anybody else. It's at a cost of about $150,000 donation. No naming rights or anything other than on the video boards. When the video boards are turned on or the scoreboards are turned on, it has, when it defaults back to their logo. But that was the offer that's on the table, and it would be for a set number of years that they would.
I think it's great that we have something to
That's
consider
one.
like that.
That's one, and there's another one for $100,000, but this one asks for naming rights. That needs to come before you guys too. If it's for $100,000, I think it was to be in $25,000 per year increments for the next 4 years.
Naming rights to how much of the facility?
To the football stadium.
Just the stadium.
Football stadium, yes.
Mr. Elkins, from a procedural procurement standpoint, what do we have to do on that? Can somebody just come and make a proposal? Or if it's something that the board has an interest in, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up tonight, do we have to actually put something out there and let people make proposals, or perhaps even, set up some sort of, bidding system or something like that? What is our constraint on that? And it could be that people aren't even interested in that, but we got to talk about it potentially either to leave the door open or to close it.
I think it's to adopt some of RTA's language. I think it depends on your comfort level for fairness. I don't think there's a procurement issue here. I think it's a gift. And I think people and entities are able to make gifts to the school board. And I think they're, it's permissible that they designate how it's to be used, but then it's up to you to say, well, under those terms, I don't want it. So, as Mr. Christie has suggested, there be conditions. You could say no, that being the case, we're not interested. But if you accept it, then I think you're bound to use it under the conditions that it was given. I could foresee someone coming later and saying, well, if I'd known, I would have gave you a bigger gift. But it's still just a gift. So I think when gifts are offered to the school board on a time-by-time basis, you by board action determine whether or not you're willing to receive it on the terms it's offered. I think that's all you're obligated to do.
There are some other issues, because I looked into this a couple of years ago when I was board chair, and there's some Title IX issues that are there, so money that comes in from this needs to be spread across athletics fairly. That's an issue. Let's see, I would say Paducah or someplace pretty far out west has some issues because their softball team is a lot better than their baseball team. I think it's
Warren
Warren
County.
Yeah, okay. So, and they wanted to do naming rights for their stadium and some other things, or those sports facilities. And the entity that was raising the most money was the softball team. And the issue was, can the softball team strictly benefit from all the money it brings in, or does it have to share it with everybody else? And that's kind of a reverse Title IX. You would think it'd be football and basketball bringing things in and sharing it with other schools. This is the case on college sports. But so I think there's some issues there. duration of naming rights, that kind of thing. Is this advertising? And, are they really a gift because they're giving us something and we're giving them something tangible in return. So there's a lot to it, so.
It would seem like if the board has any interest in this, from my perspective, tying in what you just talked about, we'd have to decide that any funds that came in, that we didn't run into issues on how those were allocated, but before then, to put some sort of proposal out there so anyone has an opportunity to do this, and submit that, again, so we don't get in the spot where we might say, well, that makes sense, we'll accept this, and then somebody later on would say, well, I didn't even know about that, I can't believe y'all did that, why didn't you let me throw my hat in the ring on a even basis?
We're discussing it in open meeting, so Mr. Christie may get some calls tomorrow for all we know.
Well, I would think that things like that would come under the superintendent, part of his public relations, of just dealing with people that I don't see the need of, to me, it's almost like you're begging when you put it out there like that. I just think it's part of his public relations. He's in meetings with people that have money, and he might say, we're looking for somebody here. And I guess because, it is new, I know being principal for many years, I've dealt with Coca-Cola, Pepsi, everybody else, and got scoreboards. Every scoreboard you got's got Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or somebody else on it, and you just try to get whatever you can. But I'm assuming that, anything that somebody brings up like that with naming, that it'll come back in with agreement, and we can approve it or not approve it. But I would look at more for Mr. Christie to be the one to solicit those type of things.
So your perspective is think Mr. Christie could probably handle it on a more of an informal basis than a formalized
I think
request for proposal basis.
I mean, if you're in Winchester right now, a business in Winchester, and you don't know we're building this, you may not be in touch anyway, so.
Well, as a point of clarification, two things. One, I do appreciate your comment about Coke and Pepsi, so understand that in our documents, we do not have those scoreboards or video boards because they often are provided by others. We do have wiring and everything and all the controls and everything and all the connectivity specified, okay? So hopefully that works. Another thing I would share is that in my years of service, I've not had anybody advertise that they're willing to receive gifts. That's a difficult thing, I think, that from my perspective, to somehow publicly advertise we're ready to receive gifts now. But that's where it is kind of more of a PR kind of thing. And that would be something that, we want to get worked out in the midterm, not short term, but in the midterm, because we are looking at providing the right kind of structure to support anything and the right kind of connectivity, so.
On either one of these, I don't think there would be any Title IX issues because they're going on to the football stadium or the gym. You've got girls basketball, boys basketball, volleyball, girls in the same thing, using the same scoreboards. At the football field, you got football track.
Only issue would come up between softball and baseball if you had something different for softball and baseball. If you had an electronic score for one of them and not for the other, that's where your issue would come in.
And what the conversations I've had up to this point is just for at the football stadium and the gym. And it's scoreboards that could be used for potentially wrestling and some other things that people are throwing. So it could be.
Well, and then just to, I guess to reiterate what I said, it's a gift given on condition perhaps that you put it in the gym, or condition that you place it at the football field. You then take into your Title IX consideration, if there is any, in your determination to receive it or reject it. But when the gift is made, terms, it's accepted or rejected on that basis. That's the rule.
Do any board members feel strongly that this should go through a more formalized process, or is your current comfort level to let Mr. Christie receive proposals? And
This is a small town, everybody knows as of right now. So,
okay.
So anybody's interested, they can call. That's that.
Central office number, good to get hold of you?
It'll work.
Okay.
Everybody got my personal phone anyway. It's 0029 if they don't, so.
Okay. All righty. Any more discussion then on item number 2, which would be value engineering and revenue generation ideas? Okay. Well, then let's move on to item number 3, preschool management. Mr. Stone.
If I might just ask a question of order. Lath is here to speak about an option that might be available to you on our athletic fields that falls under your capital topic tonight. Would you consider addressing that first in the order of the meeting tonight, or would you just want to let them wait and talk about it after the preschool discussion?
After the preschool discussion.
Yeah, I don't think we're at liberty to change the agenda for a special meeting once we adopt it, so.
Fair enough.
Let me stand this chair so I can see. Hi.
Howdy.
Okay, we've asked to speak with the board in special session for a very specific reason. We have a critical event that occurred this year that will eventually, beginning next year, completely change the structure by which we address our preschool program. We had been approached roughly 3 weeks ago from Kentucky River Foothills, who manages the Federal Head Start program in our district, along with 7 others, that they will be dissolving our partnership next year. And I'm fully prepared to get into the specifics as to why that is occurring. But I'd first like to begin by addressing the PowerPoint that we sent to you sometime back three or four weeks ago that I'd like for Kara to kind of go over to give you a brief history or to allow you an opportunity to ask any questions so that you more fully understand the nature of our preschool funding formulas and how we're partnering with Head Start and other agencies and the different revenues that come in to fund our program, because the preschool program is much different than any of our other public school programs with regard to funding and structure and partnerships. So if we could just take a few minutes to go over the PowerPoint and just touch on pages, ask if you have any questions for any further clarification, and then we can get into more specifically why we asked to meet with you tonight.
Okay. So currently, we receive funding through Head Start, which is the federal program, which is currently administered by Kentucky River Foothills. We also receive CARA funding per pupil, and we utilize some general funds. Additional funding sources that we do not currently tap into are CCAP funds, which are addressed in House Bill 200 as well. And it's also, it's a little bit different because you have to be a licensed daycare facility, which we are currently looking into becoming a licensed daycare facility in addition to everything that we currently do. And that's another per pupil per day amount, and it's based on income as well. And we do already work with low-income population, so it would be applicable to us. And then there's also fee-for-service options that we're not currently tapping into.
CCAP funds are basically the subsidies that the state gives.
Child Care Assistance Program.
That allows parents to solicit for child care. They get about $400 per month, and we figure we have about 600 kids that are eligible for that. So that's some potential funds that we could bring into the district if we were to get into the child subsidy market. And some districts design their programs, their full-day programs, by allowing CARA to fund their half-day program and the CCAP funds to fund the second half of the day program.
So you get $22 per day through CCAP if it's a full day, and $16 for a half day. I can talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. The House Bill 200 does currently have $7.5 million for the preschool education program that works through the Child Care Assistance Program, which is now administered by KDE. It used to be administered by the Child Care Council.
And
So,
with regard to fee-for-service, we've calculated that if we were to charge a fee for our service to our employees, for example, as a fringe benefit or some incentive to our employees, our break-even point is roughly $95 per week per child. That would pay for our teacher, our assistants, and some basic materials for a classroom. So roughly $95 per week would be our break-even if we were to look at fee-for-services for employees or for any other children that are non-eligible through either CARA or Head Start programs.
So CARA funding for your at-risk student, which is income eligible, or a mild to moderate disability, which would be developmental delay, speech, something along those lines, we get $4,110 per student. If they have a severe disability, we get $7,810, but we only have currently 8 students in the building that we get the $7,800 per student. Head Start funding, currently direct reimbursement amounts to $2,792.23 per child, which is quite a significant difference in between what we get currently from Head Start and what we get from CARA funding. But in addition to that direct reimbursement, they also cover the cost of 2 Head Start teachers and 2 instructional assistants. You can add a dollar figure to that and adjust your per pupil amount, but it still amounts to even or less than, depending on how you run the numbers, than the CARA funding per student. So to kind of get into that, what they give us direct reimbursement for, they give us $335,000 for staff reimbursements, for fringe, for therapy and intervention, for oversight, for mental health, facility supplies, and it amounts to the total of $474,680, which you divide that by 170 Head Start students, and it gets us the $2,792 per pupil for the year. Currently, just to kind of give you a brief overview of what our current student body is, Head Start, we have 170 students under Head Start. 75 of those are full utilization 4-year-olds. They have to be 4, and it has to be 75 under the full utilization agreement. We also get 40 enhanced 4-year-olds, which means that we can claim them both under Head Start and under CARA, so we get double funding for those students. And then there's 55 income eligible 3-year-olds. That is a really important number and a really important piece of this puzzle and a piece of what we do, because those 3-year-olds are not eligible under CARA unless they have a disability. So if you only take 3-year-olds with disabilities, then you're really changing the face of your program, and you don't have as much of a diverse student body. If you only take 3-year-olds with disabilities, you don't have those typical 3-year-olds in there with them as well. So it's important to note that. With CARA, we have 162 CARA only, and then the 40 enhanced, which equals a total of 332 students at December 1. We kind of come, we lose students, we gain a student, we lose students, we gain a student. To be honest, at the preschool every day, we have more people that want to come to the preschool that qualify than we have slots. So it's constantly, we've got these 3-year-olds coming in off of First Steps. We know we've got this many coming. How many slots do we have? So it's a little bit of a nail-biting thing every day. Are we going to have room for these kiddos? And we have to have room for them. We have to meet the letter of the law and provide spots for 3-year-olds with disabilities and income-eligible kiddos.
Let me add just something on that. The 75 full utilization, that when CARA was established in the early 90s, what the state said was we don't want to supplant or supersede the federal program. So the count that you had in the early 90s of 4-year-old kids in this county is what that full utilization number is. At that time, we were counting 75 Head Start kids when CARA was established. That was Clark County's number. Every county has a different number. So now, from that point on, we always had to guarantee them 75 4-year-olds. That's what that number is. We have to give them that number. So in actuality, when we were figuring the earlier figures per child that Head Start's reimbursing us for, it was based on 170. 75 being a part of that, 55 income eligible 3s that we couldn't serve anyway, and 40 enhanced. So actually, even though they were, we let them count 170 kids, they're really only counting 130 kids in our district, because 40 of those we both count.
So that leaves our current grant funding. With the 170 Head Start kiddos, $474,000. We have the 194 CARA kiddos at $4,110 each, which equals that. Basically, it leaves us with a $1.3 million budget, give or take a little bit. So that's how our current funding structure. Was that too fast? Do you want? I just thought you'd already read it. I didn't want to go through it line by
So
line.
the total CARA 202.
Yes, so
That's-
total, yeah.
That's how many children we counted under CARA this year.
Okay.
So it's
Just-
basically the 474,000 plus the 892,770, which equals the 1.3 million.
Okay.
Now, I'll note too that CARA's always 1 year lag. So even though we counted 202 students this year, we didn't get we won't get funded this year. Next year, it's always 1 year in advance.
Right, so that'll really be what we have for next year, the 892. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about Kentucky River Foothills and how they've been managing their federal grant, their federal Head Start grant. This is a little breakdown of each of the counties that is in that 8-county region with how many students they've been serving. I've highlighted the Clark County number because you can see in 2013, we were serving 211 students under Head Start, and you can see that that number has gone down year on year to this current year, 2017 being 170 students. You can see Jackson County has also gone from 102 to 80, Laurel County's gone from 115 to 96, and Madison County's gone from 170 to 134. So you just step back and look at that trend, and you can see that Head Start is reducing the number of students, 3 and 4-year-old students that they are working with. If you divide that number by $8 million, which is what Head Start's grant previously was, you get, in 2013, they had 851 3 and 4-year-olds they were serving, and they were spending about $9,400 per pupil.
They were generating. That was their revenue per pupil.
Well, no, okay, I don't know, but, because in 2017, now they're spending, okay, I see what you're saying, it's right, they're getting 11,000, so it's, basically, they're spending less money per pupil this year than they were in 2013, right? Which is a significant difference. So, and they were saying that they were going to have projected additional cuts across the region for this year. They were actually talking about diverting resources from Clark County to other counties and increasing other counties. So, like we said, you have to have the current Head Start proposal that they put on the table 3 weeks ago. I made this presentation. It's different now because the negotiations have changed. But what John came to us, who runs Kentucky River Foothills, and proposed was that under the 75 full utilization agreement, we have to give them those students. He would write us a waiver for 30 of them, so we wouldn't have to find them or give them the first 30 students. We would only have to give them 45 students.
Do we get to choose?
Which ones we give them?
Is it a random choosing?
Well,
How does that
Head Start
work?
uses a point system to kind of prioritize their students. Foster students are categorically eligible, homeless students are categorically eligible, but we screen all students the same way. I don't really know exactly what that would look like if we had this kind of agreement where we're going to screen students and they're going to screen students. We just have to guarantee that they have those. I've talked to other counties about how they work that arrangement when they have unblended programs, and sometimes they work completely separate. The Head Start has their own screenings and they do their own thing, and the state preschool does their own thing. So it just kind of depends. We don't really know what that relationship would look like because we haven't had that kind of relationship in Clark County to this point.
But Head Start's count begins day one, from day one of school. They have to be fully utilized, so it's typically the first 75, and they have to have 10% disability. So
Which is really a small number for them, 10% disability. We have much higher disability rate at Clark County Preschool. But under this agreement that John was proposing, he was not going to actually reimburse us for anything. He was going to have his 45 students at Generation Center, and he would cover the cost of the teachers, but we wouldn't be getting any direct reimbursement for students. We would essentially be completely separate, but then he also uses our transportation, which I'll get to in just a second. So like Donald said, full utilization is that based on federal-state agreement. Districts have to give the designated number, and ours is 75. So the current program that we have 2 centers. We have Generations, which is owned by Kentucky River Foothills, and they have 3 classrooms, and their classrooms are a little bit larger than ours, so they can have 20 students per classroom, which is a total of 60 students. In Hannah McClure, we have the big building, which is our 13 classrooms that we have in there, and then the small little building kind of represents the mobile unit that we have, which has 2 additional classrooms. So 2 classrooms in the mobile unit is 20 pupils, 13 classrooms in Hannah McClure. We can only have 17 per classroom based on Head Start regulations. Because we're blended, we have to go with the more stringent regulations, so we always have to honor Head Start's regulations for that. So we have a total of 261 students at Hannah McClure, just to give you an idea of what our current situation is. So if we become unblended, under John's proposal, it would have been 3 classrooms, 60 students at Head Start, and us with our 13 classrooms. And if we wanted to keep the mobile, we could. That would be kind of a board decision, how many students you all want to serve and prioritize, and really, you know, a cost-benefit analysis. How many students can we meet? How much does it cost for the teacher, and that sort of thing. So if we are not blended and we're not Head Start, then we can increase our capacity from 17 to 20 per classroom, which nets you about $160,000.
How is that? Isn't your classroom capacity determined by the disability level of your kids?
No, your classroom capacity is determined by the square footage. And the state says that you can have 20 per classroom, and the Head Start says you have to have 35 square feet per student. 35 square feet per student of usable space. So if you have tables and chairs and things, that comes out of your per square footage calculation. And they measured our building and determined that we could only have 17, but the state will allow up to 20 in a classroom.
And that doesn't change based on the disability level of the students, right? So if you get
No.
all the 8 severely disabled kids, it's not going to change.
There are other regulations that regulate how many kids in a classroom can
Okay.
have disabilities. It's just not these regulations, but you're right on target with.
Well, and I was going to say, actually, because we don't, if you're thinking we would maybe have 8 severely disabled students in a room, but we don't currently have
That'd be
that.
spread out throughout the school, but I was going to say it may
Exactly.
affect your capacity. so.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, right now, from what my conversations with the state would be that we could have 20 in each of our rooms, but I could be wrong about that.
No, that's what they told us for. We could have.
So, little miniature cost benefit analysis. Basically, what Head Start provides us is free training for staff. We do get free professional development for staff at the beginning of the year. They will pay for CDA certifications for our assistants, which generally cost about $450. They provide our curriculum and the remuneration for those first 75 students. That's the real benefit, is that if we're not partnered with Head Start, we have to provide them with those first 75 students, and we will not receive any remuneration for it. So that's the benefits. The cost is transportation. In previous budgets, I don't know if we really honed in on how much it costs to transport all of those students. Less funding per child. We only get the $2,700 versus the $4,110. Staff time and meeting Head Start demands. So we always have to go with the more stringent regulations, so there's additional time. And I think the key with that one is that currently under Foothills, Kentucky River Foothills Management, they decide how we meet the letter of the law. So we have to honor their policies and procedures. In addition, we lose the ability to tap into other funding streams because the Head Start's full day, depending on how you cut your hours, a state full day is, do you know how many hours it
It's
is?
3
3
hours.
hours for a state is considered a full day program. Head Start is 5.
No, it's 3 hours too, but I mean.
But we do 5.5 hours for Head Start, so we can't count that any part of that 5.5 hours towards the CCAP funding if it's part of Head Start. Less control over the classrooms, and then increased liability for state observations, meaning when we have less control over the Generation Center and what goes on in that facility, you're opening yourself up when the state comes in to observe our classrooms. We're judged on those Head Start classrooms just like ours. So, it increases your liability. Head Start looks at us the same way we sort of look at them in that regard.
But all children at both centers, even at the Generations, are Clark County Public School enrolled children.
Yes. So transportation, just to give you a little bit of a bigger picture of how much it costs to transport. It costs around $1,486.69 for 124 Head Start students currently being transported, which is a total cost of $184,000 a year it costs. And when you look at the $470,000 we get from Head Start, we're transporting them. If you subtract that out of that cost, it kind of changes the amount. So speaking about the other potential revenue sources that we're not currently tapping into, the CCAP funding is $22 a day. So $3,982 for 181 days. And those teachers do not have to be IECE certified. So that it's kind of like aftercare really is what the CCAP funding is for. The fee for service is opening it up to the public and allowing people to pay. we put an approximate amount of $110 a week. We kind of did some baseline research and found out what other people were charging for that service. So $110 a week for approximately 40 weeks equals $4,400, which makes it about the same as the CARA funding. Also, if you wanted to look at employee benefits, we kind of threw around some different numbers, but $85 a week we put on here for 40 weeks would give you $3,400 per year for 40 weeks of that offering. So that brings us to current and potential budgets. Do you want to give them a copy of that? So it's changed since this one, so.
Well, let me just take a moment to kind of tell you where we're at now, given the history. Are there any questions regarding any of the areas that we've gone over so far? Okay, as I was alluding to earlier, about 3 weeks ago, Kentucky River Foothills approached myself and the superintendent, informed us that next year they would not be partnering with our district. So all of the discussion that we've had regarding what benefits we get from Head Start are out. I mean, next year we will not be a partnership arrangement with early childhood. So what does that mean for us? So about 3 weeks ago, we began calculating the numbers, working with Alicia and the budget department on what it would look like for the board to continue funding a full-day program with CARA-only funds and with your general fund. So as we were hammering out all of those numbers and looking at the possibility of how our center would be a CARA-only and how that would affect our staffing, since we could go to 20 kids as opposed to 18 in classrooms, we were approached or contacted by an agency in Fayette County, Community Action Coalition from Fayette County, asking if we would be willing to partner with them with our preschool program, because they were going to initiate a grant in competition with Foothills to write a grant for the 8 counties, which kind of set us back because we didn't realize the grant was up for competition. Every 5 years, the Head Start grant has to be rewritten by whomever or whatever agency holds the grant, and it's more of a formality because it's a renewal grant. It's non-competitive renewal grant for those agencies. The only way it becomes competitive if something bad happens during the course of the 5 years. So we were not aware that this grant was open for competition until 3 weeks ago.
And we had directly asked as well, and were told that no, it was not open.
All right. So when we were contacted by this agency in Fayette, certainly we met with them, and it was confirmed that this grant was open for competition. Reportedly, something had happened in Madison where a child was left on a bus, which was a violation, and it resulted in the grant being put up for competition. So at that point, we started looking at how practical it would be for us to write the grant ourselves and to try to retain the Head Start grant as Bourbon has right now. Bourbon County happened to get into an open grant situation a number of years ago and was awarded that grant. So Bourbon County Public School System both controls the federal Head Start funding mechanisms and the CARA funding mechanisms, and integrates and blends their programs in their nice new preschool center, which is quite impressive. But from our perspective, we felt that it would be very practical for us to, within over this three or 4 week period of time, to solicit support from the board to write the grant and see if we could solicit the Head Start grant for this county in particular. As Kara alluded to earlier, the grant for the 8 counties is $8.3 million. And if you factor in the per pupil amount that the federal government is offering for the 8 counties, our county could reasonably request roughly $1.5 million for the 170 kids that we counted last year with Head Start.
I don't know if I can throw a little something in there, just to give you some perspective about our county's size in comparison to the other 8 counties, because you think the federal government is setting aside a pot of $8.3 million for 8 counties. As far as the TANF list goes, which is the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families goes, we are the 3rd largest out of all of the 8 counties. We actually have 311 3 and 4-year-olds on the TANF list from 2017. Laurel and Madison are larger than us, but then below us is Powell with only 200, and below them, Estill and Rockcastle with like 163, so half the amount of us. So I think thinking about 1.5 out of that pot of 8.3 is a really reasonable amount of chunk of that federal money to request.
So as we pulled the grant off the request for proposal site, it became quite obvious to us why the Kentucky River Foothills contract was being dissolved. The grant's purpose, and it's very intentional, is that they want innovative programs that support full-day expanded programs. In Clark County, we have that. The board has been very gracious to support that for many years now. In other counties, they do not have that. So when we started discussing what the Head Start program would look like in Clark County next year, it was very obvious what was going on. It was our understanding that Foothills is proposing to serve 60 kids in Clark County as opposed to 170, and convert the otherwise the funds that would have been going to the kids in Clark County to other districts to expand their programs to become more attractive applicants for the grant process. That's their way of addressing the innovativeness of the grant that's required to expand to full-day programs. It's taking one county, money out of one county, reallocating it to another county, and helping that county become full-day programs. We became very upset about that because our perspective has been that we want the funds that are allocated for Clark to stay in Clark for our community and our children in this district. And it was made very clear to us that the Foothills' perspective is that they have to look at 8 counties overall, and sometimes it's necessary to take from one county to support programs in other counties. Of course, our position was that our board has chosen to fund full-day programs in this community on their dollar, and we shouldn't be punished for having done that in this district in order to support funding for other districts who chose not to do that at that time. So that's one of the biggest reasons that we're advocating to write this grant on our own and separate from the 8-county consortium, and would hope that the federal grant reviewers would allow us to take control of our own federal grant, and whomever, either the agency in Fayette or the agency at Foothills, to take over the other 7 and implement those as they choose, as they so choose to do so. So, you know, our interest is in writing this grant. It's due April 9th, so the timeline is very, very short, but we're very confident that we can do that. If by chance we were not to get that grant with the board's support, then we would next year be planning for a CARA-only program. And if that were the case, just to consider some practical ramifications of that, this year, as we've indicated, we counted roughly 200 children under CARA this year. Our school at McClure site can hold, what did we say, 240, so as a CARA-only program, certainly we would not have any facility squeezes with regard to space and serving kids.
261 if we keep the mobile unit. You have to
Right.
take off 40 if we don't.
That's the capacity we have there. We counted 200, but easily, very reasonably, we could get up to 250 as being a CARA-only program next year. We could easily get up to 250, but as I shared earlier, we're always 1 year lag in funding. This year's grant, we said, was $800 and some odd thousand that we won't get until the following year. So there's always going to be that 1 year lag. So what that means for the board is that the next year, if we maintain the number of kids and possibly try to grow the number of kids under CARA only, if we were without Head Start grant funds, it would cost the board more money next year than it would any subsequent years, because every 1 year lag. If we were to count 250 next year, we're only going to be funded for 200 that we counted this year. So the following year, we get counted for those 250.
When we have 300.
So next year would be a little, it would cost you more money to run your CARA-only program, but any subsequent years, you would recoup that money back over subsequent years as our numbers with CARA grew as a CARA-only program. But next year, it would cost you, in order to maintain the status quo, as Alicia numbers will indicate here, and I'll pass this out to you in a minute, It may cost you another $100,000 to $200,000 next year to maintain the status quo of your carer program, where you can grow it up to 250 kids that we won't get funding to until the next year. Then the next year, it wouldn't cost you.
Is there any savings in transportation?
There would be savings in
What would that
transportation.
be? for the
I mean, I think at some point we need to actually.
Well, it would be the 100, if, well, I don't know.
It
if
sounds
you
like it
really
might be
look
a
at-
wash, really.
Right,
You would save
exactly.
money in, you'd be transporting 130 children less.
The other thing,
So where do those 130 children go?
exactly.
Head Start is gonna serve 60 of them out of the Generation Center. The
Are
other,
they still Clark County kids
Yes.
enrolled?
it'd be the 75 that we have to give them right up front, but they only have a capacity right now to serve 60. They only have 3 classrooms over there. So either they're gonna have to move the mobile on their side, or they're gonna have to only serve 60. The other kids.
Regardless of what we do, they still get 75.
Exactly.
It doesn't make
So
any
Head
difference
Start
what we do,
exists
so.
no matter what, and we will always be in some way a partner to Head Start because of that, you know.
But Kentucky
politicization
River
agreement
Foothills will not be involved in administering Head Start.
will not be involved in
Whoever-
a blended, maybe or maybe
Yeah,
not.
so whoever
Depends
gets
on
the
who
grant,
gets the
right.
grant.
Okay.
So a little bit more about the grant opportunity. The expected number of awards is 3. So the expected number of awards is not 1, and they say quite clearly in their grant guidance that if it was 1, they would expect you to write a grant for the entire 8-county service region. If it's 2 or more, that they anticipate you writing either for one portion of that 8-county region or for the entire region. So right now, we know that Kentucky River Foothills will be writing for the entire 8-county region. We know that the Community Action Council in Fayette County is seeking to write for that. Whether they end up submitting and they end up getting all their letters of support, we don't know. But then we would also like your support in writing for the Clark County piece, because at this point, we really have nothing to lose by trying to control that portion of Head Start. Bourbon County currently has theirs, and it runs a good size.
Again, right now, she showed you the numbers that we're receiving from Head Start, roughly $500,000 in cash reimbursement, a few personnel here and there. We would be writing the grant for $1.5 million for 170 kids. So if we were to get that grant, we would influx about $1 million into our preschool budget, federal budget.
And we could serve, those
Which-
kids would not miss out, because I think you're asking what happens to those
Yes,
kids
yes.
that gets lost. They will be lost, I mean, because we don't have the capacity.
Unless we expand our program.
Unless we expand our program. The other thing I'd like to point out is in my research, because, you know, we got this grant and it's a short turnaround time, so we're scrambling really fast to do the research and see, you know, if we can put together a good argument. So, and if you do support, began sort of writing. And in Dr. Bob's report that you guys have, a really interesting statistic that I kind of dug out of there was that the increase in live births from 2014 to 2015, going from 396 live births that year to 479 live births, is a 21% increase. And those are the kiddos that are going to be your 3-year-olds this year. So if Kentucky River Foothills gets all 8 counties, they don't give us any 3-year-olds, that's a huge portion of your population that you're missing out on that early intervention for kids. So I
So,
believe, yes.
if we were one of the 3
Yes.
grant writers selected,
Mhm.
and the other 2, Kentucky River Foothills and the Lexington
Community Action Council.
Community
Uh-huh.
Council, if they're writing for the 8 counties, would we also get a portion of their grant if they wrote for 8
Right,
counties
so-
in addition to
So
our
this could
grant?
come shake down in a number of different ways. So the grant readers, the people reviewing it and awarding the money, they may read Community Action Council's proposal and say, we're going to give them these 4 counties, and we're going to give
Okay.
Kentucky River Foothills these 3 counties, and we'll give Clark County
Got it.
their piece.
Okay.
Or they may read the proposals and say, this one's no good, we're going to give all 7 to this group, Foothills or Community Action, and give Clark County their portion of the grant as well.
Now, with the significant influx of money, what we would be interested in proposing is extending our regular day by half an hour. Right now, we go 5.5 hours. There's additional federal funds that come in if you're over 6 hours. We'd like to increase our day by half an hour and increase our year to 210 academic days.
really, if we are able to write for this grant and be awarded this grant, it can change the face of early childhood in Clark County because it is early Head Start and Head Start. So we would have an influence in educating children from 6 weeks old until they enter kindergarten. So you know, we know that early intervention is the key. We know that we have a sizable portion of our population living at the poverty line or below, definitely within income guidelines for Head Start and state-funded students.
So part of the 170 kids that we would be writing for that we counted with Head Start last year would be early Head Start positions for kids birth to 3. That the feds included early Head Start into this grant application process, so we have to write for both. So we're looking at roughly 24 spots for early Head Start
Because you can do home
as
based.
part of those 170.
How do you plan on providing services to those kids? Because that birth to age 3, there's a lot of those kids that need speech, occupational, physical
Yeah,
therapy.
we would
How do you plan on
hire
providing
4
that?
individuals, eight in each classroom. We'd have 2 center-based, one at GRC, one at Phoenix, and then 2 instructors going into the home to serve 10 each. So you'd have 20 there, and you'd have 16 at center-based, so we'd have 24 total.
That's a lot better than what's out there right now.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. And that home-based therapy can be really effective for providing that wraparound care for some of our most vulnerable families.
We currently have 8 high school students with children in our high school in Phoenix. 8
Awesome.
that have children.
Teen birth rate's really interesting. In Clark County in 2015, so from 2014 to 2015, because the teen birth rate is broken down into just teen births, like 15 to 19, but then there's also this smaller demographic of 15 to 17-year-olds, which are your still high school students. We saw a 26% increase in the number of teen births from 2014 to 15, from 5 to 12, which doesn't seem like 5 to 12 doesn't seem like that big of a number. But when you're talking about an increase of 26% in that really vulnerable population that needs to finish high school, that needs to stay in our system and be supported all the way through, it's a significant number.
So if I can again, redirect your attention back to possible scenarios. If we were to write this grant and not get it, for next year we're looking at a CARA-only program between 200 and 250 children, which would give us plenty of space at McClure to achieve that. And we've also spoken with the superintendent about offering some incentive program for our employees who may need child care as an incentive for working in Clark County. I really like that idea, and I'm very supportive of that. It would be a great incentive if we could offer them even a sliding scale or even a further discount than the $95 or $85 to house their children in our facilities with IECE certified teachers with high instruction, 6 hours per day. I think it would be a wonderful benefit to our employees as an incentive to stay in Clark County and work here. We could grow in that capacity and offer that fee for service next year. If we were to get this grant and the board was supportive in us writing that, then we'd be a little squeezed with space. We right now have 1 mobile unit. Very likely we'd have to add 1, maybe 2 more at that site in order to accommodate the number of kids there. Is it doable? Absolutely. We've talked about that in the past, about adding a couple mobile units on the baseball side of the facility. I've already solicited support from the city on getting a waiver to add another mobile unit next to the one that's currently existing at that site. So with regard to those 2 scenarios, I think it's certainly practical for us to honor the facilities plan and accommodate that building there for the next several years or forthcoming years to come until our bonding capacity grew enough to address a new program that we could start talking about expanding for 400 or 500 kids. I think certainly we have that capability in this district to address populations when we start looking at the different funding sources and ways that we can start serving children in our community. A few things would need to be done to McClure to ride out the next 2, 3, 4 years until the capacity was built. But certainly we're not advocating against following your district facility plan, addressing your number 1 priority out at the high school, and then quickly getting onto your your number 2 priority as your bonding capacity grew. We can make do. We've had these conversations. not a great deal needs to be done out in McClure in order to ride it out for the next, for the foreseeable future. Crossing our fingers that the boiler holds out, but even then, we could probably mitigate that without significant hardship. So that's basically our scenarios, and we would welcome the board's recommendation or direction as to how you would like for us to proceed. Quite frankly, the more we screen, the more kids we'll bring in. The less we screen, the less we'll bring in. If we're really aggressive, there's no question in my mind we could serve as many as 250 or even 300 care-only kids next year or the year after. If we're less aggressive in our screening, we could stay at 200.
Be aggressive.
They're out there. My experience has been, I think the birth rate in the county is flat, but the number of at-risk 3 and 4-year-olds has steadily increased over the past 5 to 7 years. So we were talking about building a preschool a couple of years ago. 400 was kind of the floor. We knew we had a gap facility for that. We were talking about 500 or 600 because I think the numbers are there to support that.
If I'm correct, our live births were in the 800s per age level. So you can assume you have 800 plus 3-year-olds out there, 800 plus 4-year-olds out there. So you're 1,700 kids that are eligible. We're serving 200, 250.
Right.
So.
And we do offer something unique with Clark County Preschool. All of our teachers being IECE certified, the quality of education, the quality of care, the access to PT and OT and speech and high-level interventions that kids just don't get in a different setting.
They got my support. I think this should have been done a long time ago, but you have your
Agreed.
opportunity. I suggest you take it.
Thank you.
I agree.
That's my 2 cents.
So the board will be okay with putting a couple mobile units if first of all, you're okay with us writing this grant?
You see what happens.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
And if we were to get that grant to place a couple of mobiles on the site temporarily, I think.
And all current utilities support that, or is capacity for all utilities in order for additional units?
Yeah, we've talked about that a year or 2 back, and it was practical then, and certainly I think it's practical now. I mean, there's other options too. We could look at our elementary schools to see if they have any space. All of our elementary schools are designed with preschool programs. They're just being used for something other purpose right now. Whether there's space or not, I couldn't tell you what those classrooms are being used for. But we could always contract with local daycares or other agencies for space, or we could try to make it on site with our mobiles. Of course, my concern with mobiles is security. I want to make sure we fence in those areas and we keep any unwanted people out of the areas in which our preschoolers are at with fencing. So, but another part of this federal grant is that there's an option to write into the grant startup funds. So we could, Head Start bought all of our curriculum at our preschool. If we sever ties, then they could reasonably pull the curriculum. That would be one of our startup costs for running the program. We would hope that the government would help us refund our curriculum in the event that they pull those out.
It's also going to need transportation to the students that they're going to house it.
That's right.
At Generations too, and they're going to have to look to us for transportation, so.
That's an unfunded service that the board has always provided to our preschool that's been very helpful for families without transportation, and that's going to be hard to compete with. You're okay with a full year program, 210 academic days, which would be 200.
More instruction, the better.
That's what the grant emphasizes is new and innovative models that expand the services. to
And
the
extending
children.
your
So
day
we really-
beyond 6 hours.
The more instruction, the better. More hours, more days.
But that's what's going to make us competitive in this grant, is expanding what we already have. And that's a requirement of the grant. That's why we're advocating for that expansion.
Okay. So you all have an indication from us, it looks like.
Where to go?
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, guys.
All right, thank you. Well, it is 8:14 for my phone. If you all don't mind, how about we take a 10-minute break and then we'll tie into the last item on the agenda. Is that okay with everybody? 8:28, and we're back in session after our break. We're moving on to item number 4, capital spending proposals. David Nichols, you're the quarterback on this.
Good evening. Like you said, it was a list of capital expenses we're going to discuss tonight. Just want to remind you, a couple of years ago, I took some time to make a binder. I gave the board has a copy of this binder. And in that binder, it kind of outlaid the needs of the district at that time. And as time went on, I provided updates, maybe 1 or 2 updates since we created the binder of what we managed to take off of the list. But as you can imagine, with a district this size and the facilities that we have, as one item comes off of the list, sometimes there's usually 1 or more items that gets added back on the list, or priorities of those items. So it's a living, breathing document that changes from month to month and year to year based on need. And in recent times, even safety concerns become heightened. And so other things take priority and things move around in the list. So we have been able to manage to take a lot off this list, but we've also managed to add a lot to the list. As of last year, I think I gave you a 5-year plan. I have that with me tonight as well. And the list that I provided for you tonight, it has let me see, on the low end, it has $2.2 million worth of items on the low side, cost estimate, and 2.58 million on the high side. Obviously, we don't expect the board to fully fund this request tonight, but I do believe there's some items on here that, some of these items, we asked the principals by February 15th to provide us a list. Some of those items I was able to take off of their list because I felt like they were work order in nature. We were going to address them anyway. So some of the items that the principals presented to me, we took off and put it as a work order. So this is the bulk of the list that were presented off of this binder, this 5-year plan, and the principal's request as well. If I could draw your attention maybe to 4 items in particular that I think that need addressed and probably stand out as priorities.
Before we get into the bulk of your list, Mr. Chris, do you think we ought to address, there's an item that's not on this list that I believe we can get some input from our advisors that are here in the audience. Do you want to go ahead and, would it be your preference to have them talk about that item so we can get that out of the way and then we can fully concentrate on Mr. Nichols' list?
That might free them up to leave.
Yeah, we got 4 people.
That's it. The item that he's talking about is it just come to light after we've done some planning and programming that there's a new, with the field, the athletic field surface, there's some new innovations that Leif is going to talk to you about that I thought needed to come in front of you for your consideration. It could make maintenance of the fields a little less cumbersome maybe, and also probably bigger than that, make a more safe playing surface.
And time is of the essence.
I didn't want you to get right in the middle of yours and then we'd run off and then go back in that way. Once they're done with this topic, then you can run with the football the rest of the time.
I'm used to being last.
Say the best for last, right?
He who is last shall be first.
That's right.
All right, well, the item that we had brought up or discussed when saw that there was a little more contingency, back when we did the initial design, the budget was a concern. We were looking for, cost savings and trying to do things as most efficiently as we can so that the synthetic turf system that's on the football stadium is kind of the entry level as far as the construction method of it. And basically it's a rubber and sand infill 2 1/4 inch tough type synthetic turf. The way the industry is kind of going right now, one of it is a reduced risk reduction, I guess is how you phrase it instead of safety, is that you're seeing more and more fields starting to use what they call a shock pad, which is actually a compressible pad that goes underneath the synthetic turf, and then allows you to modify the infill, the stuff that goes, the rubber and sand that goes in the turf, to where you don't have to use as much rubber. You can use more sand. You can use different stuff like walnut shells or coconut fibers, and there's different types of infill that you can use that takes that rubber kind of out of play to an extent. The reason you're seeing more and more going that way is due to maintenance. As the field gets older, the fiber wears and it gets shorter. You may start off with 2 1/4. By the time you get to year 7 or year 8, you could be under 2 inches in fiber height. Your infill starts off at about 1 3/4. It gives you about 1/2 inch of fiber sticking up above it. Well, as that fiber wears down, that infill goes down too, because you don't want your infill flush with the top of it, or there's nothing to grip. As that infill gets thinner and thinner, the field gets harder and harder. And there's some testing going on out there right now. You all have probably heard of GMAX. And GMAX is something that's included in the bid right now, in the project right now. Every year for 8 years, testing, coming in and testing the GMAX to try to keep that below a maximum amount. A GMAX of 200 is dangerous. That's where you have some serious head injuries. The Synthetic Turf Council recommends a 165 or less GMAX. We specified a 150 max GMAX for the life of the turf. So, I think we can be there. I think the way it's designed right now, I'm not going to say the field is not safe, but you have to be very cognizant of the infill depth and making sure it's groomed well. If it does wear down fast, if it gets more use than it typically would, and the fiber starts wearing down, it will start getting hard. For instance, University of Kentucky game field is rubber and sand infill. It doesn't have a shock pad. That was a choice that they made, decision that they made, and it's safe, but they maintain the heck out of it. They top it off. It's perfect every time they go out there. They test it before every game. A lot of districts don't give it the attention that it needs, and that's where the shock pad comes in. With the shock pad, even if your infill were to drop down to almost nothing, 1/4 inch, instead of the 1 3/4 that you would have, the shock pad would provide the safety, would provide the impact attenuation that you would need. In my opinion, I think in 5 to 10 years, you probably will see almost nothing but shock pad fields. I think insurance companies will probably start driving that at some point in time. So,
Bottom line,
right now we're looking at to install a shock pad on it. It is an increase right now. Right now it looks like probably around 75. Don't hold me to that because that is a very rough quote. Pencil has not been put to paper on it by the contractor as a formal.
I'm guessing this is 1,000 and not 100.
Yes.
Does it extend the life of the
It
field?
can extend the life of the field. With synthetic turf, the carpet sits on a crushed stone base, and the fibers are tufted through that carpet, through the backing of the carpet. And over time, they rub, and that stone will rub the fibers, and it'll end up cutting the bottom of the fibers, and the fibers start coming out. It's just kind of that's part of it. Most of them design a secondary backing or coating to try to resist that, but it happens. With a pad on there, you lose that friction, so yes, it can make it last longer. In addition, the pad is something that you put down now, and most of them are warranted for 20 years. So when that field is worn out, you take the carpet up and infill up, you come back with carpet right on top of that same pad. More than likely, you'll have to replace a piece here and there that'll get damaged during the installation or take up, but that's common, that's normal, but it's not the entire field. So you're going to get typically two lives, 2 turf systems out of that pad.
All right, so walk us through, right now with the current design that we have, you would expect us to get how many years before we have to replace it?
You have an 8-year warranty. It all depends on the amount of use and how well you maintain it. And maintenance is critical on that. If you don't maintain a field, you can cut its life cycle in half. If you abuse it, you can cut it in half. But if you maintain it well, right now you've got a warranty for 8 years.
So 8 years to, well,
Probably the max you get out of it would be 12. I would say 10 would be applicable. I'd say if you put a pad under it, you would probably, I would feel more confident in saying 12.
okay, and in 10 years, in today's dollars, how much, if, with the current design that we have, how much would we have, are we gonna have to spend to replace the synthetic turf?
Today's dollars, you're probably looking at $450 to $500.
Okay, so just for fun, that would be $50,000 a year.
better all the time.
And you're guesstimating
That
that this might add
give you 2 more
this might
years.
add 2 years to it, so potentially that would, you'd have to run the time value of money on it, but potentially if it costs $75,000 to $100,000, you might pick it up on the back end in year 10, or that you get 2 more years out of the field. And this is just speculation.
True, and yes, that is, and you'd have to really do some crunching of the numbers on it. Again, maintenance is big. Does it mean you don't have to maintain it? You know, for performance, you want to maintain it for performance. But if something happens, somebody can't get out there, a piece of equipment breaks down, you can't get out and maintain it, you're not risking the risk reduction. Again, I'm not going to, I hate saying safety because, you know, there's risk in everything we do. And by doing this, you're reducing your risk. But there's always risk. To say a field is safe, field is unsafe, I don't like using that terminology. I don't think it's accurate. You know, one is a higher risk and one is a lower risk. Now, there could also be, like I said, I think insurance company is probably going to come into play on this in the future, and so there could be savings in insurance as well. Right now, I don't think anybody's currently seeing those, but I think that that's something that's going to be coming down the road.
Is there a field in Kentucky that's been built with a shock pad under?
Absolutely. The last 3 Fayette County school fields were done that way, and the University of Kentucky intramural fields that were installed this past year also had shock pad. Now, they have shock pad under them because they are rugby fields, and the World Rugby Association requires a shock pad under all rugby fields. That's a requirement for their use.
Not that it's increasing the GMAX capability, but because it gives the probability of having effective GMAX? Is that the reason why? Because it changed the GMAX?
It allows them to go in with a deeper, more sand infill over top of it, to where the sand doesn't give you any impact attenuation. It doesn't. It's not soft. Obviously, it's not going to absorb the impact. But rugby likes a fast field. They don't like a spongy, soft, bouncy field. So it allows them to make it a little stiffer while still maintaining the impact attenuation. Now, there's also, the pad companies are pushing for this, and it's currently used for playgrounds. There's a test called the HIC, the Head Impact Criteria Test. And it's different than the GMAX, which is currently the standard that everybody goes by, including the NFL. But it's for playgrounds, and it's for a higher fall, because the playground equipment is typically higher. It's a round or circular weight that they drop, and it measures the force hitting the ground, the deceleration, as well as the velocity. I think you're going to start seeing that come into play for athletic fields. It's a very expensive test, which is probably the main reason why it's not being used very much right now. But I think that's something that's going to evolve as well. And with a shock pad, you know, if that test comes into play, your shock pad is going to make sure that you hit it. An infill, non-shock pad field, once you get down to a certain depth of infill, will, even if it's maintained well, once it gets down to a certain depth, it's not going to pass it. It will meet the fall heights for a HIC. But right now, HIC is not standard. HIC is not really in the game for sports, only for playgrounds.
So what are you all, from a timing standpoint, asking an indication of the board tonight?
Whether it's something that you all want me to pursue, whether it's even on the table from your own standpoint, to talk to the contractor and do an official PR, a formal PR, and get the numbers.
It will change the depth of the.
No, it will not.
Change the depth,
No.
okay, I understood it was gonna change.
Right
the depth.
now,
Okay, that.
what,
that adds
in a
time.
perfect world, the subgrade would be cut down for the thickness of the pad. And these pads, for those that are just curious, are not thick. I mean, that's it. That's all that you're putting underneath the field.
$75,000.
You know, they're very thin. I
Should have brought that out.
big carpet.
For $75,000?
It's a big pad.
Is that installation as well?
That's installed, that's everything. You know, it's, and, you know, the pad that I would probably recommend for this is not the Cadillac pad, which is by this company, but I don't have a sample of it. It's a pad that is kind of a workhorse pad. So the Cadillac is gonna cost you well over $100 for that size field.
I guess it's too late to go back and
But-
consider grass.
At this point, yeah. At this point, yeah, you're kind of beyond that point. But what it would do is basically, your field would be that much taller. And then around the perimeter where it ties into the track, you have 12 feet between the no-touch line for soccer and the edge of the track. And you'll taper that distance over 12 feet, so you won't even know it. You'll never even see it.
So what is the time frame of, since a lot of people are being hit with this for the first time, when do you all need an indication on this?
Probably next month's board meeting.
That'd be great.
You mean-
How quick would it take you to turn around a proposal for us?
I mean, next month's board meeting, that's when
When we would.
you would pitch in, like for us to either
We
say,
would
go
come in
ahead.
with
to the-
with a hard number, I think, at
Okay,
that point.
so you would like to get an indication right now whether you should even waste your time or not waste your time,
Well, it's the contractor's time to put it together, all of
put
those
it
numbers
together,
and whatnot.
and then that would come back then. So,
Now, does it have to be then? No. If it goes beyond that, I will tell you that the price could be a little higher, because once they start manufacturing the carpet, it's gonna be 2¼ inches. If you were to go with this, there's a chance we could drop that down to a 2-inch carpet and save 1/4 inch of the fiber, which would be some cost savings in the manufacturer, and that would be passed on down. So if it's, you know, board meeting after that, is it a killer at that point? Probably not. We could not go any farther than that, though, because they also have to manufacture these pads, and everybody's trying to get them done this summer.
Will somebody test this on a regular basis? I mean, do
Right
we
now,
have the ability to test this? I mean, the equipment, or do we have to bring in a specialist to come in and do this? Because it looks like to me that you don't test it enough, you get into a liability situation when somebody gets hurt and they come in and say, well, nobody's tested this, and
Yes. What we have right now in the contract is once a year. Typically, you do it at the end of spring, beginning of summer, so it gives you some time if you have to address anything. They'll come in and run the GMAX test, which is the current standard.
Which costs how much?
Right now, it's already in the project
Okay.
for 8 years. 8 trips, they'll come in and do GMAX once a year. And they'll also do a field rejuvenation where they go in and deep tine it and kind of loosen it up to try to maintain that. I put that in there because I want to help protect you all, because of that, exactly what you asked, Mr. Peridot.
well, it's about, I mean, obviously, just by looking at this article that I'm looking at here, natural turf is always better, but then you have to maintain it all the way through, and there's a lot of inconsistency from one part of it. This does allow you to have control for the entire field, I believe, you know, so you kind of know where everything is. I mean, just reading about natural turf being very good, but then again, what kind of maintenance goes into that? You know, the people that have really good natural turf, they have people that's all they do is take care of natural turf, and I don't think we'll have that. there. I just worry about making sure that we, that it is tested, make sure that obviously our coaches need to be trained, because it's probably not something you want to put your tackling sleds on and push up and down the field on, or anything at all.
Typically, they make sleds for synthetic, but yeah, you don't want to put your standard grass skids on there.
May mean something too, as far as having concerts or anything else out there, that's something, I mean, I'm just trying to visualize other things that may affect this surface that may come into
As far as
question.
concerts, depends on what you're talking about as far as concert. Are you setting up a big stage out there and lights and pyrotechnics and whatnot? I would say, no, you don't want to do that. If it's concerts, as in you're just going to set some chairs out there and have an elevated platform sitting on in one of the paved end zones, beyond the end zone, then yeah, that would probably be fine, or something there on the track. You'd probably be fine with that.
So what about a graduation stage? Would it have to be in the end zone or
You
on
typically would want to put anything like that on, you put plywood down and you want to put it on over your track, typically. Now, if you want to put it on the field, you can put down, plywood and stuff to distribute that load, but you want to avoid point loads and things that are going to tear or gouge your turf.
So what's the temperature reading in terms of how many board members think that they should even try to solicit a harder cost on?
Can I ask one question first?
Sure.
As far as maintaining the field, you talked about maintaining it being an essential part of the likelihood this field will last.
beyond essential, it was critical?
It is critical.
My question is, does this add or take away from the ability for us to maintain? I mean, is it going to make it easier to maintain or less easy to maintain?
It will not make it easier or harder. The maintenance on it will continue to be the same. If you do it right, what it gives you is that, like I said, if a piece of equipment breaks down, if you can't get out there, if something happens to where you're hosting a big event and they're playing soccer, and the goalies have worn down, have pushed an inch of the infill out, just through game after game after game after game after game before you can get out there and regroom it. It keeps that shock attenuation. It meets your Gmax. It will always meet your Gmax. Answer your question at all? Okay.
So what's the feeling of the board in terms of the temperature reading? Whether they should try to get a harder number on this?
I think we have to look at it. I think we should try to do everything we can to, just looking at this, talks about not only the risk of concussions, but skull fracture, broken bones, and things like that. If it is something that we could purchase that will be safer for student athletes, I think we should look at it anyway, and then determine whether the cost and maintenance, all that, maybe we'll get a little bit more information by that time. But I think anytime somebody can throw something at you, it's going to show student safety. And I think we need to at least address it and get some good numbers on it and make a educated decision from that point. That's my feel.
I don't want anybody to get confused about that risk reduction thing. What you already have purchased and is going to be installed is, a safe feed.
Right.
It meets the Gmax.
Well,
So
what I'm
it's gonna
doing,
do that
I'm just looking at what this,
As long as you maintain it.
what you're doing with maintaining it and things, you're making something safer. If you put in just natural turf and you maintained it to the fullest, and it had full grass, and then that's safe too. So everything's gonna come down to maintenance there, but I just think if there's something that we can do and it's cost effective on maintenance, whatever, and it's still a safety issue, because you can control the Gmax, I guess, on this
It's
much
yes.
better than you can on it, because you can actually test it and you can see where your field's at. So you do have some control of what your field is like. So.
Yes, it is easier to have a more consistent G-max than a
Right.
natural grass field, which the G-max is affected by even how much water you put on it that day in that area versus another area.
Which reduces risk,
What's that?
which further reduces risk of injury.
Because it's more consistent, yes. You know, there was a big push in pads a couple years ago when the chrome rubber issues first came around. Since there's really hasn't, been anything to say chrome rubber's bad, you've seen kind of a decrease in pads. There was an initial jump up because everybody said no rubber, and rubber is what adds your cushion to a non-padded field. Then you have to go to TPE or EPDM, so there's some other things that you could use. A lot of people said, no, we're just going pads and sand and organic infills. You've seen that taper off, but I fully expect it to continue in that direction. It just made a really fast jump a few years ago. Like I said, all three of the latest Fayette County, Dunbar, Tates Creek, when they replaced theirs, and then Frederick Douglass, all over the pads.
Ms. Hicks, Ms. Ritchie,
Well-
Dr. Kudak, do you think it's worth them at least investigating further?
Possibly.
Yeah, but I have to see what the numbers look like, so I need to do a little bit more research on my own, so.
Yeah, on the safety, some of the stuff that I've looked, and I know the safety risk, those terms are kind of
I
out there.
understand.
But in reading some about this sort of turf, do you all run into anything on cancer?
That's where the crumb rubber
Yes.
scare came in. And
Yes.
all the studies done to date have shown that there's no increased risk. Matter of fact, I'm the vice chair of the Synthetic Turf Council, and we met with a representative from the EPA just a few weeks ago. And, they're still, they were supposed to have answers to us a year ago. They're supposed to have answers to us this past fall. That study is stretching out.
Some,
I don't know what's
some.
coming out. The European studies, there's been 5 or 6 studies done in the time period that they've been doing theirs that have been completed that have shown that there's no increased risk.
So some of these are just too coincidental, but it's still just coincidental that.
So I think I could summarize that the sense of it is that it's worth at least you all getting more formal proposal to come back to us with. Fair enough?
That's fair enough.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry to interrupt you.
So let's see, at a half an hour per item, we'll be done.
Yeah, buy us dessert.
But when it gets cold, that's the dessert.
Does anybody need me to go over my introduction again?
I thought you were going to go over the book.
Start page 1.
Obviously, there's a lot of things on this list, a lot of things that you've seen before. Some new items have been added to the list. But I want to bring your attention to maybe 3 or 4 things that need our attention immediately, I believe. That is the roof on Strode Station Elementary School. Currently, as that roof has deteriorated over time, it has shrank, which pulls away from the curb. Probably 2 times a year, we have to go up and cut a section of that out and redo it so that it actually stretches back over to the curb and does not pull away. So we're constantly repairing that roof on a consistent basis at this point. So I
Was
think-
last time the roof was, that roof is as old as when the fire was, right?
It's original, I think.
It's original roof.
Oh, I'm getting confused, okay.
Not sure, but
Not sure, okay.
So it'll be 25, 27.
92, school was 91, 92.
Well, you don't fool around, you started out with a $500,000 item.
Well,
That would be a
again,
BG
it's
item.
probably the most.
Yeah.
That would be a BG item, you'd have to
Oh,
submit
absolutely.
BG.
Absolutely.
How old is that roof?
It was over the school, it was built in 92.
And obviously, the maintenance budget cannot withstand that kind of.
It's a pretty good roof.
Yeah. You get a
26
20-year
years.
warranty, so you're, 8 years beyond your warranty?
Now, the estimate I did on that roof was based on $9 and something a square foot, which has been the standard for the last couple of roofs that we did.
For fall, yeah.
So, I think we did the maintenance roof, we did a repair on the Campbell roof. And that totally ended up at dollar amount, and I just used that per square foot figure to come up with what I came up with. So we would have to go out, for proposals and so on and so forth.
Is that big enough we have to hire an architect?
Yeah, sometimes your roofers have their own architects. Some roofers do, but yeah, you have to have an architect on that.
Okay.
So, this is the only roof that's on the project.
One
It's
contract.
the only roof that's currently on this page. If you want to back up and look through the binder, there's a couple other roofs there we can take a look at as well. Preschool being one, and sections of that roof are over.
Since you led with that one, do I pick up that this is probably the most pressing thing that you think we ought to be looking at?
I believe it's one of the most pressing things we need to do.
Okay. All right.
What are the others?
I think parking lots are something that we need to take a serious look at. We looked at purchasing our own seal and stripe equipment. We didn't purchase our own stripe equipment. But looking at the cost benefit ratio, I think that renting the equipment on a summer basis would be more economical for the board, but that would probably tie up 2 of our maintenance personnel. Most cost effective, obviously, is to do it ourselves. The most, if you look at the prices, for example, Campbell Junior High, we just sealed and striped that parking lot front and back. It cost us right at $25,000. But a 2-inch top coat on there would cost us $276,000. Campbell is probably one of the worst parking lots we have as far as it being patched and pieced back together, with a lot of cracks. Another example is GRC. We've been in that facility 5 years, and we've never sealed that parking lot. Eventually, it's going to crack, and we're going to end up with freeze, thaw through the winter and spring, and it's going to start to break up as well. So,
Justice as well.
so I think it's imperative.
That's just the front part, not the back part that's porous, right?
Well, sections of the back part are where the students park, but in between would be.
Yeah.
Have to be maintained. So I think we need to do it on a rotating basis, and I think sealing and repairing parking lots need to become a yearly event, a summer event that takes place. And again, we address that in the 5-year plan every year, doing a couple different schools based on priority. So I really believe that parking lots will come back to bite us if we do not start paying some close attention to those as well.
On that same line, I think that we probably need to look as a district of how much parking Campbell needs when all the facilities leave there and go out to the high school. I mean, is it necessary to have that lower parking lot once?
That's a good point.
I'd hate to, do a really good job on it, and then let's just tear it out, put something else there. So I think that's something that we do need to talk about, is that do they need that much parking once our football field, basketball have left there?
That's a good point, because we have a lot of people asking us for green space too, for Little League.
Right, yeah.
It's a big area.
I mean, you got a lot, opportunities to do some things there.
You do a traffic loop around that, just around the outside edge of, use the interior part.
It's really
Just
worth
about good,
discussing.
I mean, I think it's something to think about anyway.
Not to interrupt, but, Stroh Station, I think the lower lot, I think there's 3 levels there. The lower lot, there's a lot of traffic that comes through there from the neighborhood. Instead of going down by
Right.
Lowe's and out, they want to come through our parking lot, down through Baker and out that way. It is seen significant damage in the past couple of years, with some large spots that need to be fixed as well. So.
Mother Nature is not helping you at all right now.
Nature is not helping out.
Salt.
Freeze, thaw. The third thing on the list that I would probably bring your attention to is anything safety related. And a lot of these things, I think Mr. Stump addressed in our last board meeting. You'll see some cameras on there. You'll see some, like I said, it's a very fluid list, and things pop up and get moved around and shuffled around. But some of these safety items on here have been addressed at our last board meeting. There's a few more that I think should be addressed. I think the GRC gate, I think that if we're wide open there, I think that a gate, automatic gate on either side of that guard shack, not only there, maybe at Campbell as well, it's probably a necessary item in this day and time to be able to stop traffic coming in and going out.
And some of us, we have a big summer that we like to do a lot of projects in, and we have been trying to nibble at replacing carpet with VCT tile at Strode and Shearer, and, the people are asking for new carpet in our libraries and such. We really need some guidance with what projects and how we would fund any summer projects that the principals are really advocating for as priorities on their list, that we can already, at this point, start preparing for whatever BG1s or whatever has to take place, so we don't lose any time in the summer starting these projects.
From my conversation with principals, carpet is a big issue. I think we've talked about carpet for 2 or 3 years, and there's still people that are frustrated in their buildings of not having carpet either replaced or removed, and with tile.
We have a lot of requests for things.
I think that's a big issue.
We try to address those even during Christmas break, fall break, spring breaks, during the summer especially. Especially with construction of the energy construction that's going on in some of the buildings, it was hard to get in and find appropriate space to store that stuff, maintain that, change it all out while other construction was happening at the same time.
We've stopped supporting carpet requests in classrooms for obvious reasons with pests and things of that nature, but libraries and things we continue to support in libraries or even office areas, but not in our classrooms.
What does the RR do septic line under the hallway at Conkright?
What, I'm sorry?
RR do septic line under hallway at Conkright for $90,000.
Is it redo?
That should be redo. I'm sorry.
Okay, but redo, what's involved there?
I think that a portion, when Conkright was renovated, only a portion of that septic line was replaced, when probably the entire septic line should have been replaced. And we've looked at the cost of what it would take to replace what remaining section needs to be replaced, and that would involve taking up the hallway and digging down and replacing that septic line.
Right now, we're jetting it about once a year, and we sent a camera down into those systems and saw where the metal pipe on the bottoms was deteriorating and actually cutting down into the dirt. So at least once, possibly twice a year, we have to hire a company to come in and jet it because it gets clogged up so easily. It's getting hung up on where it's deteriorating and swagging, and at some point it will need to be addressed. But right now, we're jetting it once or twice a year, and we're able to get by.
I'm aware of that need, but I want to go on the record by saying that should have been addressed at the time that building was renovated.
Couldn't disagree with you.
Agree with you.
While it was exposed.
So why was it not addressed then?
Because it wasn't in the architect's renderings or scope project.
That's been an ongoing issue that the plumbing at Concord.
And none of our local folks were aware of the need then?
I can't speak to that. That was
Before our time.
my predecessor was overseeing that work.
Your gut feeling we can get till, not this summer, but next summer on that? But who knows, assuming you can predict the movement of ground.
Assuming I cannot predict that. If things remain constant, we should be able to get through till next summer, yes. If things remain constant.
We've stopped using grease in our kitchen, so that's helped out a lot. We're not putting grease down those pipes any longer, so that's.
So how are we disposing of the grease? I was sitting here thinking the same thing.
We stopped using grease in our kitchens for frying fish. Michelle Obama
Yeah.
eliminated grease frying in kitchens,
Yeah.
so We used to have a pretty bad problem with grease down in the pipes, so we don't have that any longer, so.
So French fries aren't French fries?
I would
All baked
think
now?
that's probably true, yeah. We're baking now.
Yeah.
It's all healthy now. No more grease.
Like I said, there's 2.2 to $2.6 million worth of projects here that are needful. I'm not gonna say any of them is not needed, but when it comes to making priorities of what the maintenance department can afford, obviously, we can't afford these big project items, and we feel it necessary to come before the board. And it seems like we come before you a lot, and we're always asking, but please keep in mind that's kind of the nature of our business, is to maintain the facilities and grounds that we have, and that takes time and money and effort and energy, and a lot of times the current budget that we have in maintenance, we're always trying to keep an eye on, and we can't take on these big ticket items without some help from the board.
And in the past, we've been addressing a lot of this with capital outlay funds, and that's going away and reducing on a regular basis, and may not be available next year, but we were using a lot of that money to address carpet, tile, replacing carpet.
I'll say this, that I got this kind of layout from Mr. Christie, even back when he was in this position. I looked at a lot of his spreadsheets of plans and needs and assessments done in the district. And again, it's very fluid. You'll see things that are on his list that are still on my list. I mean, it's our list, don't get me wrong, it's not him versus me, but it's our list. But some of those things are still there, and we've removed so many of them. But as we remove items, other things become priority. It gets older, 5 years old, 10 years old, that things wear out. So it's a constant list, and it's a constant need, and it's constantly us becoming before you to ask for, yet again, more money.
And we've really focused on preventative maintenance, and more so than I think we ever have in the past. And the parking lots is a perfect example of that. The more we neglect and refuse to address those, the more you spend on the tail end with repairs. You have to coat those parking lots at least every 2 or 3 years in order to get the longevity out of those surfaces, that blacktop surface. If you don't, you get cracks, sections break up, and you're spending 5 times more than you would if you had good preventative maintenance. And we've never really had a really good preventative maintenance on our parking lot structures. That's why they're in the condition that they are now, quite frankly.
What if we ask the maintenance department to do kind of like what Alicia does with finance, just every quarter or so, just submit a report to the board about pressing issues of things that are not currently in the budget, but these are these type of things. You don't have to present it, just make sure it's in a packet or something if we want to talk about it. Or obviously, if you have to have it replaced, we want you to talk about it, but just something. I mean, I don't know if I've heard about the roof at Stroh before. I don't know. That's probably come up somewhere there. I don't know. It just didn't seem like something that I was thinking about off the top of my head. And so that way, if it's in a report or something to a board every once in a while, then I'm seeing, guys, we're going to have to address this. We're going to have to address this. We're going to have to address this. Something. I mean, I don't know what other board members may think or something, but sometimes I think it's kind of good. And I'm not saying every board meeting you hand us one of these.
Right.
Here, but just say, we spent a lot of time maintenance on Stroh's roof this past quarter. It looks like it's going to have to be replaced, something
For
along those lines.
For instance, I think our backhoe was in the shop probably 5 times this past summer. If you knew that up front.
Same way. I mean, we get the same things, with vehicles or whatever else there. If we get something like that, every so often, this has been high maintenance for us. We spent this much money on this time.
Currently our backhoe is running okay and doing well at the moment, but it's had a history of being in the shop. So I can see that becoming a priority.
It's a 15-year-old piece of equipment.
But it would seem like some things like that you would normally budget for, like maybe a truck a year or maybe.
We've been trying to pick those off, at least try to get one a year, because we have 10 in our fleet. So if you replace one a year, you're replacing 10-year-old vehicles if you buy them brand new, and we don't buy them brand new, so. We've been trying to do that.
All the time, we don't think about, the scrapers for scraping parking lots and things like that that are high dollar type of things to have. And
this is a vehicle replacement list based on year purchased, year age and the number of miles on the vehicle.
But you all include in the normal budget replacement of some of those, so.
We can replace pretty much one thing. Last year, we bought a bucket truck with our money, so we shot.
So you have something, okay. So the safety items, and we talked about the GRC gate. There's some other safety items on here potentially, but in terms of
Cameras.
impact on safety, which ones do you want to draw our attention to?
Well, some of them, like I said, have probably previously been addressed. I think the bus garage camera system, the central office camera system, the PA system, the vestibule at preschool, I think is on here. Those things were addressed at the last.
Okay, but the ones we haven't, like the lock change out to make one district access key, is that would be nice to have thing, or is that something that might have a real impact on safety?
Well, as of right now, we have 2 schools. I think Shear partially and Strode entirely that needs the lock mechanism changed out. That would
As
make
we
it.
built new buildings, everything that we've done in remodels and everything, we've keyed them the same. So that we've got a system where we can control, they're not even, a lot of it's not even with keys. It's computerized cards that we can control. And if somebody leaves us or they lose it, we can, by computer, we can cut it off and nobody has access to a building. So that's the safety part of it that we're going to.
But we do have to have consistent course for teachers to lock their classroom
Yeah.
doors.
Interior classroom. And that's what some of these are, is an interior classroom.
That's the safety
where
piece. They have to be able to
original
lock.
locks.
Are you saying that we potentially can't achieve the desired goal of locking classroom doors to the extent that you want to?
That's true.
Now,
At a few of our
what?
schools.
In current schools, we can't lock individual classroom doors.
There's inconsistency with the keys that fit. I mean, there may be 50 keys out there for one building, which we could have just a few that would achieve that goal. It's a matter of changing the cores inside the handles. You have cores that certain keys.
But they can still currently lock their doors. It's just that multiple keys floating around could unlock it.
For example, in an emergency situation, would we look for 1 or 2 keys versus looking through 20 keys to unlock a door to get students to safety?
If security is going down the hallway, in some of our buildings, it may take 15 keys to unlock the classroom doors, whereas what we're coming back and doing, because they're keyed individually. They were all keyed individually originally. And we're trying to get them all to where we've got a grand master key that a security person can go down the hall and unlock any interior door.
You don't have to change the cores for that.
And again, that's.
I think that needs to be at the top of the list.
It's an estimate of $26,000 to finish both schools up. Again, I think Strode's a little more because obviously we never touched that one. Sure is partially done, so 26 is a pretty solid number that would finish that up.
Okay, for the record, 15 might be exaggerating a little bit. It's not 15. That might be a little high. But it is multiple keys to do a corridor in some of our other buildings that have not been remodeled.
So Campbell has areas as well?
I think Campbell's.
The new wings, as far as the new wings.
But aren't they using H-wing?
Yeah, they were using H.
And
I think we've had enough cores to replace those, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. And today, for $3,000, we picked up out of our maintenance budget to do preschool. We're changing cores in preschool, making all those consistent, but we don't have the funds to do Strode and Shear. Those are higher ticket items.
What's your timeline on the roof? That's not gonna get done this summer if you gotta do BG and hire an architect and all that. So next year?
You know, in times past, we've used Insulated Roofing as our own architect. And they usually come in below everybody else, and it makes it more consistent across the district if we did. We've had success with that before. So I don't think. this
My
summer-
experience is anytime you add KDE to something, you can add time. So,
And money.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well.
But I think it's possible to get it done this summer.
the Ivory Tower's been demolished, but KDE lives on.
What helps a lot is if you go with state vendors, you don't have to bid it out. You know, Insulated Roofing's on the state vendor list as well as some others. Unfortunately, roofs more locally is not, so that does save a great deal of time. And Insulated Roofing has their own architect hired on staff, so they include those costs in their
Architect, which KDE will recognize too. They recognize their architect.
So it does make it more time efficient and
Cost efficient.
cost efficient as well.
On these wooden gym floors, are these replacements or repairs or?
That was a last minute item that came in, I think from,
It says wooden gym floor at Strode Station,
right.
but it's included on 3 different columns for Strode Station. Oh, maybe that was the low cost and the high cost, but it's all the same.
I think we have to be careful with those because of the grade of those floors may not be conducive to wooden. Because the way the doors and the exit, the concrete exits the doors, if you bring that elevation up, you may have some issues structurally with converting a concrete floor to wood. There may be some structural issues with supporting that. Same would be the case for McClure or any other gym that's concrete.
So is that the reason, does the $100,000 include the adjustment for grade or whatever? No.
$100,000 probably for a wood gym floor to get put down, finished, painted and everything.
I don't know that you can adjust the
And I
grade to
don't think
accommodate.
that's gonna be the issue. That's just the cost of the floor if the pad was at the right height. The floor, those wood floors are basically a floating floor. There's a
Right.
spring that goes under, they feel it's almost like it's a liquid that solidifies. And to do that, the concrete's gotta be lower so you can build up, and it's, the concrete's already set at floor level going into the hallway, then anything you build is gonna be a step up, which is probably not gonna be covered.
Again, I included all requests on this list.
Some of them may not be practical. I mean, we have to research.
It seemed like the rekey thing, you got some traction on that from a safety standpoint. The GRC gate at 13.5.
Again, that's a cost, that's an estimate. I believe in some instances, according to what kind of gate we go with, it could be more, it could be less.
Do you think that would help safety out there? Is that giving some traction on that one, y'all?
I can tell you one other thing that's on there that in my opinion, would increase safety for students at dismissal, especially is that bus pad, the new bus loop at Justice out back. And some of that green space out behind the cafeterias to put a bus lot there where we can move the buses for that. They now park out on that street, the kids have to walk way out there in the weather, and then or they park up on the, and that means they can't leave because of where they are. If we had a pad in there where the kids wouldn't have to walk up toward the concrete or walk out to the road in the back. If the pad was closer to the back of the cafeteria where they could dismiss from there. A pad there where buses pull in, they park like they do at the other buildings, and they park in the same spot every day for the kids, and then they can leave from there, they can go out the road, even prior to concrete's dismissal. And when we've had them on the same lot, Justice may get their 5 or 7 buses loaded while concrete's still loading, so but Justice has to sit and wait. They're sitting on a bus waiting for those first buses to go out. With this bus loop in there, we could fix it to where they could load, they can come in and can.
There's
Since the day the
space,
school opened.
there's space for the bus loop the way it needs to be?
Yes.
That was Susan's #1 priority, I think. And
We've talked to Susan, I talked to Susan for probably 2 years about this, but we've had some folks come in and look at it, yes, there's space there.
yeah, that would require a BG1 too.
Yes, it would.
The exit lighting at Concrete and Campbell, is that, you're familiar with what the problem may or may not be there?
I think it's the exit lighting in H wing at Camden. Exit lighting. I'm sorry, can you, is it the first page number?
Yeah.
Yes,
First page.
third item on the first page.
It's just that some exit lighting, and especially the H wing area that needs to be replaced. I think we actually did a work order on that. It's probably something we can handle in-house.
Yeah, we're all LED in those buildings now anyway.
Sometimes I've added items in both locations, so I apologize for that.
digital clocks at 2 different schools. But that,
I say leave old clocks in there so kids learn how to tell time that way.
I was thinking
So I
the
would
same
support that.
Yeah.
Is there
The
any benefit from
advantage,
it?
the advantage of the digital clocks is you can keep them all pretty much at the same time,
Right.
whereas the others you can't.
When the bells go off.
They can learn to do it.
School is
different
dismissed
time
when the
in
teacher and
each
principal say so.
so is there on that, it's a pretty big price tag, is there anything overriding in your mind, like, boy, we're just really, it should be somewhere down? It says digital clocks for Campbell and for Baker. Just,
Baker should have.
We've replaced some, I don't think we replaced all.
I mean, you say, I get kids with that all the time, that you don't get dismissal time, and we're losing 5 or 10 minutes.
With the dismissal,
10 minutes a day, their education
we're
time.
not losing any time or gaining any time because of the differences in the clock, because the clock that we ring the bells by is one standard
Okay.
clock, and it's not losing or gaining time, it's okay. It's just that it might not have the exact same time that the kids see in the hallway. That creates the problem. If the kids think the bell's, not ringing early enough.
I personally don't think that's a high priority.
That would be last on my list.
Right, how about,
That's my 2 cents.
And then I've added all requests from principals.
how about the storefront in Phoenix? Is that a safety issue, or is that a repair issue?
They have a small one there. I mean, it's probably more of a repair issue if they're okay with the size of the one at the entrance there.
This is $4,500, we can't be a whole heck of a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, they have the skeleton of one there now.
Just means another wall coming across on the inside there, to finish boxing it in where there's some separation. Because right now, when you get buzzed in, when you walk through that first door, you're actually inside the building.
Right, yeah.
It's just another wall,
Right.
it's another wall that comes across that creek.
I would say that's a higher priority, because that really is your building that's left without vestibule,
Okay.
a functioning vestibule.
Seems like we talked about that there when we approved these others, so want to jot it down on the higher interest list.
The band room. Storefront. That is pretty much-
And of course, there's items that are not on here that I brought up last year about trying to allocate some money for band equipment so they can get on a more of a regular replacement schedule, and also talk about athletic equipment.
It's on the list they got it.
Yes.
This list you
Where?
all sent at the very end.
I think the first list that came out, canceled.
Not on mine.
Okay, I'm not sure we went fishing for the second revision.
So the second revision,
It's not in our packet.
What's it say on it?
There was an athletic request from GRC, it's GRC, 50,000. He has a handout with all the requested items. There's also a band request of $336,866. And there's an item of it also.
Could be that it was updated and we didn't go back to it.
on the first meeting that got canceled.
So where should it be on the file?
It should have uploaded, there's no there.
That's it. That's the high school athletic equipment, and there'll be another that should be one with GRC band.
Should have been at the bottom of your list on the third page.
I've got it on my screen and it is not there. And I've got it on my printout and it is not there.
There's the other one.
The one he's got up there now is the band, but you've got copies of it.
Is this summer project list?
This is the needs list,
I don't think it's, I think it's two separate conversations.
Okay, but I don't even see these files.
Mike, what are the numbers on those files?
Actually, I got those from Mr. Nichols, just then I scanned them in.
I uploaded them.
I've got them both in my pile.
I think the confusion came in, the first meeting that was scheduled for, what was the date on the first
It was
meeting?
right after KSBA conference, and we had some.
Third or fourth.
State tournament.
I guess a state tournament. That list did not contain these two items. When we canceled that meeting, these two items came to my attention, and I added them to this list for resubmission by Ms. Nance, and I gave her proper paperwork, and we assumed that it got uploaded to the new agenda.
Well, let's see if they're on there. Well, it could be a boo-boo occurred somewhere along the way. That's a technical explanation. But I think we would like to get an electronic version of these so we can have this.
We can send it.
We're probably not going to move forward on 336,000 tonight, are we?
No, that needs a BG1, the little issue.
Well, not when it's
Music
all
instrument.
individual instruments, that's what 336,000.
But I will point out, you do have a rather attractive contingency in the construction fund at GRC. If you have any money left over from the project, that can be reallocated to things like sports equipment and band equipment for that building, since it's under that BG1 for that building.
So let me make sure I understand what you just told me. So we have our main contingency, and then we have contingencies that are still with the individual projects, and one of those is on the, is one on the GRC that we didn't, what? We didn't sweep all that
Let
away?
me
I thought we
clarify
did.
some language here. Okay, contingency fund is our general fund dollars, we call that contingency funds. The BG report that has contingency built into it on the BG report. When you get done with the project and there's monies left over, those are called residuals. That's the money Donald is referring to. When you finish your project and the BG scope, any monies left over, regardless of what category they're on the BG, where you should have spent them, you have monies left over, residuals, that you can then use on that project. Or
Right.
in this case, we took residuals from the GRC high school and the previous concrete renovation and put on the current athletic project.
Okay, that's what,
Yes.
we've already,
Yes, we've already
we've
done
already
that.
swept that away.
Yes.
The monies left over from the high school have now been committed to the athletic.
Okay,
We've
already
current
swept
BG1,
that.
you have over $1 million in that.
1.7
Well, that's the current one, but we
on
don't,
the athletic complex.
it'll be a while before we finish that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, but we already swept that one. I think there's
We've already
another one
swept
out there,
that.
like the preschool or
The
something like
preschool
that
is
that
like
still has.
30.
Okay,
Yeah.
Something thousand left
Okay.
on the preschool residuals.
But that was designed to purchase athletic
preschool.
equipment and things for the new gymnasium and football complex. It was built into that budget,
Into the preschool one?
no, into the high school.
Okay, so what was the comment about available residual in the preschool?
We currently have roughly $31,000 residuals on closing out where you all purchased the preschool building.
And did the road.
That project is closed out and we have $31,000 sitting in the bank that we need to, you all can commit to something. It's in the construction fund, but it has to be committed on a BG project somewhere.
But not on the, it doesn't have to be on the preschool.
No. it
So
can
the
be committed
GRC
on-
stuff wouldn't have to be on
mean,
on GRC then?
No. Not
Okay.
not at the end of the project, once it's all said and done, you close the
Okay.
project out.
Okay.
You moved
It
it.
has to be
then-
closed
then
out
it-
per KDE to then.
That's correct, that's
And
correct.
then you have to ask for
Okay.
permission to use those funds for something else.
Get some value engineering. on
In fact, we
it.
use concrete funds on GRC project. I mean,
what other indications would you all like to give from us? It seemed like there was begrudgingly, because of the amount, that there was subtraction on the stroke because it's 26 years old, that we're gonna have to start getting serious about that. And the safety
Basically,
items.
we're patchwork now, is what it amounts to on the roof.
And the safety items,
Also, the
And the
parking.
parking lots?
and the parking lot, the seal and stripe.
And the concrete plumbing, though we may have some legal redress there.
I'm sorry, sir?
We may have some legal redress there. I think that should have been done as part of the project. I think we need to investigate why that was not done correctly. I remember a sizable change order we approved in the middle of spring break, looking at plumbing.
Yes.
And there were issues with that change order, if I remember correctly. And right in the middle of spring break, if I'm not mistaken. And, yeah, we basically it was either a special meeting or we were lucky because we had a meeting scheduled, but we needed to approve that so that project could go on. So school could open that fall. So, but yeah, that should have been addressed as part of that change.
The architect specs told the contractors, if there's a section of pipe that's in good condition to tie into, do it. So they just exposed a section of pipe, tied into it, and didn't check what the pipe looked like on through the hallway.
So
They
that's
just tied into the
so
good
that's
section.
a problem. So either the builder or the architect was at fault there.
I would say, that would be my argument.
So I think that should be pursued. My 2 cents. You know what? The floor was open. I remember seeing pictures of that plumbing.
Yes,
I
we
probably
were
have it on my
there. We
laptop somewhere. Yeah.
yes, we did a tour when all that was going on.
Right. So
We
that
actually-
should have been addressed then. Why it was not at all.
At Campbell, we intentionally shot video camera down all of their pipes while it was exposed to share with the board whether it needed to be replaced or not, and it didn't need. We have video coverage of Campbell, having checked that out while we had that exposed, but we didn't do that at Concrete.
We going on somebody's word, which was not appropriate, so. Okay.
So, going back to your question, Mr. Heisel, I mean, what are we asking for? We're asking for the board's direction on moving forward with some of these projects, especially the ones that we cannot handle on our current maintenance budget. Number one priority being probably Stroh's roof. Number two, the parking lots. And again, we could probably handle some of that individually, parking lots, but it's probably patching or sealing, but some of our parking lots are beyond patching or sealing. I think we need to tackle them on an individual basis and maybe even talk about resurfacing some of our parking lots.
So on the seal and stripe, there's, I think it's about $104,000 in seal and stripe going across that way.
That's if you just seal and stripe everything.
But is that just a stopgap? Does it address the real problem?
In some parking lots, it takes care of the problem. In some parking lots, you're wasting your money.
High
Let's
school-
not waste the money.
High school, Justice, and some of them, that's fine. Sealing them, striping them is gonna take care of them. Lower Strode, and some Campbell. Needs some repair.
That needs some repair.
And basically, we're at a point, probably, the repair needs to take up some major areas and do it all at once instead of some more pieces.
With the question being in Campbell on the.
Bottom line, whether or not we need to do some study there, whether we need that lot, and how much we want to invest in that lot.
But all the seal and stripe, but I think you also said to do this over several years on a rotating basis. So is that 104,000 spread over a couple, 3 years?
I think that'd be a
Or
good
is that-
start. We need to maintain our new parking lots like the GRC and Justice, get them on a good preventative maintenance schedule so they don't deteriorate. Then the others we can fix on a rotational basis as needed.
Here's what I would throw out. I think preventive maintenance on new parking lots is fine, but we need to get estimates on replacing the ones that need replaced.
Yeah, we've
So-
got some pretty bad sections.
So those are all gonna be BG one size items too, so.
I don't think so, yeah. If you do it right.
I think those two.
I don't think we're gonna get all this stuff done this summer, because we're looking at a couple of years worth of work here. So I think if we figure out which ones are in some serious shape, get some estimates, start working, then try to figure out what's what. So,
And Mr. Christie did Campbell's front parking lot about 4 years ago, so I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Front end, side and back, we haven't done that bottom one. We sealed all the cracks. We did-
The foundation repair at Hannah McClure, how emergent is that issue?
Well, that's going to prevent us from licensure. And as Carol was explaining to you earlier, we have to be licensed in order to do daycare and to tap into those CCAP funds and into the others. So, I mean, right now, it's functioning, but it sank probably 4 inches. You know what ramp I'm talking about by chance?
There's a lot of ramps at Hannah McClure.
All right, if you go in the front door, go down the hallway, turn right, then you've got that steep ramp that goes down.
Yeah.
That's
With the
sunk
multi-level-
about 4 inches because you have your sanitary pipe running under that, and you've got a void under that ramp that's allowing that to sink below the foundation surface. And we had a company come out to see what it would take to jack that up and fill it, and they said they can't fix it, it has to be torn out and replaced. The state licensure board says they will not license us as a daycare facility until we get that fixed. So
And
that-
15,000 will fix it?
That's a guesstimate. I would have to have priced it. I'm not really sure, necessarily how much it would cost, but I would say closer to 30 if I were to guess.
That's what I would think, or 15 doesn't sound like enough to do that.
Well, we did a project last year. We did have the people come in and jack up the concrete. And I used that cost estimate there. But since then, they've said that
We
that's
can't
not
do
an
it that
option.
way. Got it.
Well, we may be pleasantly surprised, I think, so, but I mean, it's necessary to get licensed for daycare. Right now, we contract out.
So they'll license it with all those ramps in there?
Yes, we have
As
to back, we
steep
have
as
to
they
take our
are?
wheelchairs down backwards. That's the only solution for.
But they'll license it with that, with
They will, they said
doing
that they
that.
would. We got to paint, major paint throughout the building. But that's really the things we got hit on the most is the paint and that ramp.
But then again, if we get that grant, there's some startup kind of stuff, I don't know.
You can write in renovation to the startup grant, if that's right, you can.
There's a lot of small money here and there and sort of maintenance money here, or repairs, but I guess a consistent one, and Joel started talk some, is the carpet VC tile removal. It's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 different schools. Is that something that you would estimate we would do on over a several year basis, or what's your thought on that?
We're continuing to do it. I mean, it just depends on how fast do you want to accelerate that. We did, during Christmas, we did 2 or 3.
4 each year and 2 at Stroke.
Say, well,
They're about 3,000 a class.
yeah, per room to take up the carpet and replace the tile, VCT tiles, about 2,500 to 3,000, depending on the room size.
So this is 146,000. One of the big numbers on here is Phoenix. So you take that out, we're closer to 100,000. Realistically, on a year, how much would you like to add into your budget?
It really depends on the board's future expectations for Phoenix. My understanding was you're going to move them into the H. William Campbell.
Well, I'm just accepting out Phoenix, so that'd be $100,000 for the other remaining 5 schools. And how much would you like to fold?
At Campbell,
fold
they're
into
talking
that?
about the main thing at Campbell, is the library and the auditorium. That's the 2 areas, that's
The auditorium's used a lot.
And my recommendation, and we've all talked about this, and do it the same way we are in high school, and do replace the carpet in Campbell's auditorium, take it all up, polish the concrete, and then we put carpet back down in the aisleways, no carpet under any seats. That's where the high school is, it's all polished concrete, which is carpet in the aisleway. It's a lot easier to clean, upkeep. And when you do have to replace carpet, you're just replacing rows of 29.
You have to take the seats up?
Yes. They'd have to take them up to put carpet down too, though.
Wow.
So either way, the seats would have to come up if you replaced all the carpet.
Do you all think pushing some more money into that to accelerate that process, some of y'all are in favor of? Not that particular
I'm at
school,
the
but
point in the evening that I don't make my best decisions when it's approaching 10 o'clock.
Okay.
I don't think the board makes its best decisions when we're approaching 10 o'clock.
Do y'all want to wrap it up from this
We got a bunch
aspect
we need to
then?
Go back and rethink, then, probably. If that's the case, we got a bunch of decisions to rethink.
Dr. Kudak,
Yeah.
Ms. Paradell, Ms. Ritchie, y'all want to wrap this up for now then and say we've taken a pretty good stab at it?
Yeah.
All righty.
Roofs, parking lot, safety-related items, as discussed.
Roof, parking lot, and safety items. I'm sorry, is that what you said?
All right.
As discussed.
I think the sense of the board is we've addressed a lot of those things. It is 9:42. I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn then.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Ms. Ritchie. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hicks. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Y'all want to take a break or try to jump right into the next one and see what we can or cannot do on this? Want to take a 5-minute break? All right, let's do a 5-minute break. Well, it's not a 5-minute break, I'm sorry. So we will be conducting the 8:30 meeting at 9:47. Try to make
Do I get to sit or no stand?
Special meeting, which is originally scheduled for 8:30 this evening. Unfortunately, we've run over. We'll start out with a moment of silence. If we could all stand for a moment of silence. And then the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the
flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item is the adoption of the agenda. Since it's a special meeting, I'm not sure there'll be any changes, but that doesn't mean we have to do all the items that are on here. Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Motion by Dr. Kudak. Second by Heisel. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. That motion passes 4-2.
Sorry. I said no.
I'm sorry?
I said no.
Are there two noes?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. So that motion passes 3-2.
If I vote no, that means we go home, right? I should have. Oh, wow. I wasn't thinking.
No
Sorry,
offense,
guys.
Alicia.
We're going
We're
to. I'm going
exhausted.
to try to get us out of here by 10 o'clock. There's an easy path.
10.
So again,
10
that
minutes.
11. That motion passes 3-2, and the dissenters were Ms. Ritchie and Mrs. Hicks. Okay. Number 2, discussion and approval allowing Director of Finance and Superintendent to request proposal for investment banking. If I could suggest to move us along in 11 minutes. This is broken into 2 portions. Portion number 1, which is saying if we want to solicit for proposals for the for investment of our construction funds. And item 2 would still be allowed to do proposals for our general fund. I'm going to put out just for a suggestion to move things along that since we're not binding ourselves here, that that we establish a number that we think is reasonable on this draw schedule, and then let Ms. Ellis put it out. Make sure that Mr. Elkins is comfortable with the wording on it, but put it out and we'll see what response we get. Could be when he comes back, we don't like any of the terms, it doesn't make any sense, but I think there's a reasonable chance that we'll want to at least look into it.
Didn't one of those get voted down?
The one for general fund got voted down last week,
Yeah.
or we could bring it back
Yeah.
again this week.
As we've discussed before, we can continue to bring things back ad infinitum.
Well, none of us are in favor of that. Well, I'm okay talking about because that failed for lack of a second.
Right.
I think we're all okay about talking about doing something with the money that we have sitting in the bank for construction.
And that's-
20 million sitting in the bank for
that's-
construction. We're not going to spend it right away. If we want to invest some of that short term, that's fine. But as evidenced by that large needs list that we just saw, and my comment in the paper last week, I think the majority of the board thinks that money should be kept in the board. So-
Okay, if we could, I'd like to split this into the 2 parts. The part that we think we have some agreement on is the very first part we're addressing. How much time do y'all want to spend talking about this concept and getting into the details of exactly what the draw schedule should be that we should advertise for?
Is there going to be a third part on the discussion?
No?
Okay. There was some mention last time about the board policy related to this matter that had not been updated since 2000, long before any of our current people were on the board. Is that not an issue anymore?
I think, I don't want to speak for our attorney, but I think it presupposes what proposals we would get from people as to whether it's compliant or not. It could be we can get proposals that are fully compliant with our current policy. Is that true or not true?
I think the policy becomes an issue if you receive a proposal that's attractive to you. If you're just absolutely completely opposed to or disinterested in any proposal you receive, then I don't think we have to take the policy issue up. In other words, it may give the appearance to the board that it's so worth doing that we ought to take time to revisit the policy that's now 18 years old. Did that make sense there?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you saying that we don't have to change the policy today to at least solicit for ideas?
That's my belief, yes.
Okay.
Maybe we get no ideas and we don't want to change the policy.
Or we get the ideas in, and then we know what changes we may or may not need to make to the policy to
Correct.
accommodate that idea, or ideas. Okay? Are you all okay with moving forward? I'm trying to move this forward. To move forward, then do we need to specify the exact draw
Judy,
schedule?
what's the policy you're referencing?
Oh,
What's your policy number?
It's 04.6. That was adopted, amended August 1, 2000, order number 14H.
Do you all want to specify the exact amount of the draw, or use some, be more comfortable with letting the finance officer, she's already given an estimated draw schedule on here, and perhaps we should maybe put a buffer in there or something like that to hold back some amount for expected contingencies, but potentially just go with that.
We have $26 million in cash currently in the Fund 360. This is based on a $20.5 million draw, which we will not be invested, I would presume, in April or probably not May either. So that's a little over $1 million in itself that will not get invested and still be in the cash account and has been spent. This is the schedule that John Hagan and Codell put together for us based on the current scope of the project. This is what he's saying based on buying materials and paying the current contractors that he's going to need monthly. So this would be the schedule that I would suggest we follow, because that's what he has told us as the construction manager. He's estimating that much money each month.
And there's still plenty of reserve beyond that.
Yes.
So he could be off by $500,000 to $1 million a month or something like that, and we're good.
Mhm.
Okay. How about the language that's out there? Do we need to specify exactly the wording of the ad, or do you think we'd feel comfortable enough in taking the proposed wording from last time, and making sure that that's compliant with the suggestion of our attorney, and then letting them throw that out there?
I sent in 2 corrections to the ad. I don't know if those got made. I did not receive a response about them.
Go back to, I think I sent you the email, if they were grammatical.
So like draw schedule or?
Drawdown is
Drawdown.
one word, through is THROUGH, should be.
Okay. Mr. Elkins, did you have any problem with the wording of that ad?
You know, I didn't actually see the ad. I'm looking at the OneDrive now. Is it located on OneDrive?
It's in last month. It's in last week's
Oh, so it was
documents.
it was on the,
It was on the
meeting agenda.
the
Okay,
March,
I didn't go back
the
and
March,
review that.
whatever
So it's
meeting.
in the regular
meeting.
agenda.
Item 6, D or E.
I've got it here.
So how much specificity do y'all want to get into on to move forward on to at least solicit proposals? The easy route is to, we could have a motion to allow them to solicit proposals along the lines of what was suggested last week with certain grammatical changes and any other legal changes that Mr. Elkins might think is appropriate based upon the draw schedule that's in front of us right now. And then we can move forward with this.
Judy, do we even need a motion for this, if I'm reading this policy correctly? It says the finance officer shall, and it says all this other
Yes.
stuff, and it
That's
says.
the way I
report
read
to
the policy to
report-
begin with, but we're
Report to
not
the
gonna
board
do
at the
this
next
without your
meeting,
all's
so,
approval.
Yeah.
okay.
So you think
This
we,
was back when interest rates were good.
are you saying that you think that she could go, well, golly gee, I think I'm going to go ahead and solicit proposals and I don't need the board's approval?
And is that what we want our policy to be?
I'm not looking at the policy aspect right now.
Well,
I'm looking at the
we have policy out there, we have, let's who change it, we have to follow it. Okay.
This was brought before the board because it is a big decision, and I wanted you all to be a part of it, and not something that I did on my own and made a decision and then brought to you after the fact, and then have a discussion that you don't like my decision-making, because I felt that that has been done prior.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
I was allowing all of you to be participants in it instead of being after the fact told what I have done.
Okay.
But yes, per policy, that is exactly what I could have done. But I did not. I chose not to take that route.
Okay.
Okay. Then, would a motion then be appropriate to ask her to solicit for proposals along these lines?
Can't we just acknowledge if it's in the policy? Just acknowledge that she can?
Because we're gonna bring them back to you, and you're gonna decide whether you do it or not
I mean,
anyway.
if the policy says she
All
can,
we're
she
doing, all we just
shall.
wanted to know was whether you supported.
How about we would have a motion to support the finance officer's efforts to solicit proposals
To follow the policy.
I'm good with the finance officer following.
to invest our construction funds on a longer-term basis at a higher interest rate.
Let me just add one thing here. I still think you're bound by the later statute, 66-480 subsection 3, which requires your policy to have certain provisions if you have an eye towards any sort of investment income that's other than interest income. So if you wanted to, if you were looking for any kind of income on capital gains from investing in securities or mutual funds or something like that, your policy would have to be revised before you could do that.
But I think that presupposes what proposals that she might get.
Sure, but I just wanted to make sure that you didn't take your eye off that. There still has to be, there still would have to be some review.
So, I've made a motion.
Can you restate your motion, please?
Nope, but Mrs. Nance can. All right, I will try to restate it again then. I would like to make a motion.
There's a lot of peripheral discussion. I'm not sure what the actual motion is, so please restate it.
I would like to make a motion that as a board, we support the finance officer, her actions in soliciting proposals to invest up to $20.5 million of our construction funds in longer-term instruments that potentially might have higher interest rates.
It was a one long motion.
I'm going to add to it pursuant to 66-480.
And I've
Well-
already sent our policy with Mr. Elkins' suggested changes to our KSBA Rev 2.
I was going to say that needs to come back in June. We look at the rest of the policies.
To adjust our policy
Well-
pursuant to that statute.
Well, I shall state that it's implicit in any of my motions that I do not want to intentionally go against any laws of the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
I understand that, but 66-480 is very specific as to what the public agencies can invest and where they can place their money. So this is money that's collected by us, by taxpayers' dollars, and it's put in the public trust, and we have to be very careful how we spend it and how we take care of it. That's why we're here.
I'm happy to accept that friendly amendment to my motion.
Per KRS 66.480.
Yep.
I've got that in here.
Pursuant to 66-480.
Pursuant.
I didn't go to law school, but I can use lawyer terms from time to time.
You're doing a great job, Don. Great job.
I like using that one on the medical students. They love that.
Okay, so I've made the motion.
I'll second it.
Second by Dr. Kudak.
I didn't even try to write that motion down.
Would y'all like to have further discussion? Okay, all right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so that motion passes 4-1, with Mrs. Hicks voting no. Okay, on the second part, I appreciate y'all discussions about spending all the general funds down and not restricting them. I think that's very wise. However, I would point out that KRS 160.470, Section 6A, instructs us as a board to reserve a minimum reserve of 2% of the total budget. And from my standpoint, I would not want to intentionally be putting ourselves in any place in which our reserves would fall below 2%. To wit, I think it would be very logical to invest an amount up to 2% of our general funds into a potentially longer-term instrument, and that would be approximately $1.2 million, and to round that down to a nice friendly $1 million. And again, the kernel of this is that we would keep available to us everything above 2%, but we would not intentionally put ourselves in a position to go below 2%, but we would still want to accept an instrument that would give us the capability, in a worst-case emergency scenario, if we had to get below 2%, we could still tap that money. But our intention would be not to go below that. Because it's not our intention, there's no reason to have that in a lower interest rate earning instrument.
You'll put that in form of a motion?
Okay. I would like to propose that the board support the finance officer in similar wording in soliciting proposals to invest $1 million of our general fund dollars in a longer term instrument that potentially would have commensurate higher interest rates, and still pursuant to KRS 66.480. Is there a second on that motion? Okay, no second, motion fails. All right. Anything else you all want to talk about on item number 2? All right, move to item number 3. It says, consider approval of change order for GRC competition gym and athletics field complex regarding shower pan enclosures and drains. Seems like we've addressed this, that we do not need to talk about it. Are there any motions that anyone would like to make regarding this, or any discussions on item number 3?
I'm actually in favor of keeping the floor as designed, because I think at MRSA in showers is a big issue. It's easier to clean. There's less surfaces, there's less crowd. I think that's one step we could take towards decreasing the risk of kids acquiring infections in our facilities. So I'm going to support the original. I know it's more expensive, but I think it offers some. Yeah, I agree. If somebody gets mad and runs into the shower, throws something at the shower, we're going to have a big repair bill. But so.
Okay. So then, discussing item number 3, since the discussion has broken out, which is fine and dandy, Dr. Kudak has proposed that we leave that as is, and we not give a directive to the.
I just threw that out. It's y'all's decision, but that's my thought. So.
That's what I've said all along.
But
I've said all along as well.
Yeah.
anyway, this item's for a change order, and we're not really doing that, right? So we can move on, or?
But they're going to have a change order ready for us at the next meeting.
Well, right now, if we don't give them indication on this, it potentially would delay the project. Do I understand that correct or not correct? So that's why I put it on here, is I thought we needed to decide this. Otherwise, their project might be.
Yeah, because they're putting pipes in the slabs.
I'm
So.
gonna head out. if
Thank
that
you.
is okay.
Bye.
I'm not trying to be rude.
Thank you.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Do I misunderstand the timing on this?
No, this, if they do a change order, it will delay the pouring of that concrete.
They do a change order to switch
make the
from the
switch.
current design to ceramic tile.
Yes, if you go to the ceramic tile, it will save some money. It will prevent the pouring of that slab once they get the drains put in the proper place. They're still plumbing those.
If we don't decide right now.
Well, they've got to plumb the drains either to fit the current existing plan or to whatever you all direct them to. They've held up on that piece of the plumbing right now. they're getting ready.
Well, in my notes, I have that they will generate the change order based on our discussion earlier. Did they not get the impression that we were gonna go with the other, with the ceramic tile? And they would be generating a change order to bring back to us, but if we're not gonna do that, can we let them know
I will.
not to do
I'll let
that?
them know, but if,
Well, that's
depending
why,
on what you all do.
well, that's why I put it on here, is because we I think we left them with the impression that we're gonna do it.
Yes.
But that's why it's on here right now, so we can upgrade from impressions to absolutely we're gonna do it or not. So that we don't have this, I thought they said to do it, and we're not gonna do it, and now we'd have a big old mess on our hands. Dr. Kudak now suggested that, he thinks that we should leave the way it is.
So is that suggestion in the form of a motion?
I can make a motion that we, after a discussion of the shower pan enclosures and drains, that we leave current programming in place for BioPrism shower surrounds.
Second.
Okay? We have a motion by Dr. Kudak, second by Mrs. Hicks. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
So, that was Mrs. Hicks, Dr. Kudak, Ms. Ritchie, you in favor? Mr. Peridot?
I'm a no.
I'm sorry?
I'm a no.
Okay, so there are 3 yeses to that motion and 2 noes. So the noes would be Mr. Peridot and Mr. Heisel. But since 3 is larger than 2, then the motion passes. So we will have GeoPrism surrounds and 27 bathrooms as the plans are currently designed. Okay. All right, next item would be a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion.
Motion to adjourn by Ms. Ritchie,
Second.
second by Ms. Hicks. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0.
No.
And it is 10:10.
10 minutes over.
I wanted to,
Who stands in it right here?
You? Was you in there?
Listen, I